The merfolk worshipped a god named Join. That said, she wasn't truly a god. The term god was applied to her by the merfolk in a show of reverence and humility. The truth was that she was actually just a mysterious entity from the bottom of the sea who had godliness. Even still, godly entities that could lie dormant on the seafloor would obviously be incredibly mighty. In fact, they were so mysterious that most species couldn't understand them, and the same could be said for their mightiness. Before the broken face of the god arrived, sea monsters did exist in the sea surrounding the revered ancient mainland. But they weren't like this. After the broken face of the god arrived, living beings were changed. In many places, entities appeared that contained some of the essence aura of the broken face of the god, and those beings came to be called godly entities. Their predecessors, which had been researched by various intelligent species, were evolved forms of grus from the forbidden regions. Join was one such being. To ordinary mortals, she was basically a god. For many epochs, godly entities like her stood at the apex of creation and were worshipped as deities by countless minor species. Even the most powerful species would fear them. However, as the epochs passed and the intelligent species in the world grew stronger by struggling to survive, they came up with ways of defending themselves against godly entities. In fact, some species could pose a threat to godly entities, and the most powerful species could even fight the emperors of the Forbidden Grounds. Humans, despite being scattered in so many locations, counted as one of the powerful species. The waters seethed with every step Join took on the seafloor. As she approached the Merfolk Isles, Master Seventh stood atop his dreadnought, looking down at the bottom of the Xianxia, said the Merfolk Patriarch. If Join comes, she'll bring a tempest of blood and carnage. There's no need for your sect and my people to fight each other. We're allies, and we can continue to be allies. We'll cede all our rights and benefits to you. We'll even help you defeat the sea zombies. You and your people are bending the knee too late, Master Seventh said coolly. Ignoring the Merfolk Patriarch, he waved his hand and said, "Bring out the war banner of humankind." The moment the words left his mouth, the Dracolizard dreadnought roared to heaven, and the 13 Gold Corps elders bowed their heads respectfully. The over 100 Foundation establishment cultivators did the same. On the tallest building atop the Dracolizard's back, an enormous banner appeared. It was fully 300 meters long, multicolored, and was splattered with blood. It looked tattered, as though it were actually only the corner of a much larger banner. As it flapped in the wind, it released an unparalleled murderous aura that caused heaven and earth to tremble. In fact, that aura was so strong it caused the air to go still, and the surface of the sea to become placid. It seemed capable of suppressing all beings in existence. Even godly entities would bow their heads in its presence. The blood splattered on the banner pulsed with godliness, as though countless godly entities had died beneath it. Especially noteworthy was one specific drop of blood that was a pure gold color. That blood exuded a sensation that surpassed godliness, making it seem very close to the broken face of the god above. The Merfolk Patriarch's face drained of blood, and in a trembling voice he said, "The war banner of humankind. There's no way 7 blood eyes could have a precious human treasure like that, even if it is only one corner of it." The banner flapped, and a massive wave of force erupted from it, creating the illusory image of a finger. It contained a boundless sensation of ancientness, like something from the river of time itself. It did not contain any special mightiness, but anyone who saw it, even from afar, would feel so shaken their mind would empty. It seemed like that enormous finger represented a Tao of heaven, and as it stretched forth, it pushed down toward the sea. The surface of the sea for a diameter of 50,000 kilometers evaporated, revealing Join, the eyes on her tentacles wide open as she fought back against the power of the finger. Her resistance did nothing. Most of her tentacles simply exploded, as did her fish skeleton robe. The long tongue coming from her back withered up, and the rot on her flesh spread out rapidly. Then, her lower half exploded, sending flesh and blood spraying out everywhere. Her top half survived, and as she screamed in agony, she retreated into the depths of the sea. Of course, no one in the Merfolk Isles saw any of that happening, save the cultivators on the shoreline who could see through the weakening spell formation. The disciples in the underwater world had no way to see it, except for those who had special items that let them see what was happening outside. For instance, a spirit rhino eye. Inside the temple, Su Qing's eyes were wide as he stared at the image projected by the spirit rhino eye. By means of that projected image, he saw the dreadnought, the banner, and the huge finger. He saw the 50,000-kilometer area of sea evaporating and Join exploding. However, there were limits to what the spirit rhino eye could do, and after a certain point, the terrifying image caused the eye itself to explode. When that happened, the captain did something that struck Su Qing with profound shock and left Zhang San wide-eyed and speechless. He took out a hand-sized crimson lump of flesh and slapped it onto the statue of Join. The flesh melted, spreading out over the entire statue as it did, almost as if it were eating the statue. They even heard bizarre chewing sounds. When the statue was completely devoured and had become a massive chunk of flesh, a crevice appeared on it. It was almost like a door within the flesh. It wriggled and twisted as if it wasn't stable. The entire chunk of flesh did the same, like it might wither up at any moment. Within the darkness of that crevice was what appeared to be the seafloor, and scattered about there were numerous chunks of flesh. Astonishingly, they were mangled bits left behind after Join exploded. Apparently there were other beings in the depths of the water who found those chunks very attractive and were rushing toward them greedily. The aura from that flesh was so powerful it emerged from the crevice, allowing Su Qing to sense it. It was so strong that it seemed capable of instantly killing anything it encountered. Even the seven blood eyes forces in the air above the island seemed leery of it and weren't interested in trying to acquire it. However, the captain's eyes glittered with unprecedented madness. Turning away from the chunks of flesh on the seafloor, he looked at Zhang San and Su Qing. "I know why the two of you are here, and I wasn't lying. I told you I'd bring you to the good stuff, and those things are right here. Zhang San, you want the blueprint for the merfolk's flying fish armor, right?" The captain pulled out a bright red jade slip. It was clearly an extraordinary object, as it radiated strange fluctuations, almost as if whatever was inscribed therein was alive. Within those fluctuations was the image of a fantastic suit of armor. Even at a glance it was obvious it was extraordinary. Zhang San's eyes went wide as he reached out toward it. "What is it doing here?" The captain smiled and handed the red jade slip to Zhang San, who took it excitedly. Next, the captain looked at Su Qing. "Now for you, Su Qing. You wanted some foundation establishment pills, right? Here are 3, and they're very high quality, very expensive, very precious. First-class pills, no doubt. Definitely not like ordinary foundation establishment pills." He produced a jade box that he handed to Su Qing. "Well, what do you think? That's what you wanted, right?" Pupils constricting, Su Qing opened the box and saw 3 blue-colored medicinal pills that exuded a fragrant aroma. They also emitted a faint mist, making it seem like they were living things. Shaken, Su Qing closed the box, put it away, and looked up at the captain. There was no way he would believe that the captain was just going to give him something as valuable as this. "It took a lot of work for me to help the two of you out. And since I helped you, now you're going to help me. Stand guard here for just a short while. I'll be back in the time it takes an incense stick to burn. When I'm back, I'll share some of the loot with you. And if I'm not back in that amount of time, you can just forget about me and leave. I'm going to collect some of Join's flesh. She's a god to the merfolk, so it'd be great if the two of you could pray for me to live through this. If I do get back alive, then the 3 of us are going to be rich. Rich, you hear me?" Su Qing couldn't have been more shocked to hear that. He looked at the flesh through the crevice and sensed the terrifying aura. Then he looked at the crazy look in the captain's eyes and came to the conclusion that the man must be insane. Either that, or he didn't like the idea of living for too long and wanted to live dangerously. Su Qing had encountered people like that before. They usually came in 2 varieties which were polar opposites. One was the type who quickly ended up dead, and the other benefited wildly. Su Qing hoped the captain was the latter, and therefore he asked, "How can we increase your chances of coming back alive?" "You can't, it all comes down to luck." Su Qing nodded. "What's the point of life anyway?" the captain said. "To have fun, right? And it's not my first time having fun. All right, here I go." Taking a deep breath and his eyes burning with that crazy look, he dove into the crevice of flesh and blood. There was something else in his eyes besides craziness, and that was ruthlessness. He really did seem like he had a death wish as he shot toward the mangled remains of half of Join's body. The wriggling lumps of flesh already seemed like they were starting to wither, as though they might not last much longer. Zhang San watched for a moment, then sighed. "Have you ever seen someone in chi condensation like this? Does he freaking want to die?" Su Qing shook his head. Even if the captain cut open his own belly to show his cultivation base and prove he was a chi condensation cultivator, Su Qing wouldn't believe him. "Are coffins expensive in the capital city?" he asked. "I had one made for him before," Zhang San replied, "but never needed it, so I demolished it. Oh, this reminds me. I used the demolished coffin in your Dharma boat. I ran out of materials and didn't have anything else on hand. When we get back, I can make him a new one." Su Qing didn't say anything in response. Then, a moment later, he looked toward the entrance of the temple complex. Narrowing his eyes, he quietly said, "Something's coming." A moment later, they heard sizzling sounds, as though something was being melted by poison. Then they heard the booms of Xianxia's traps exploding. It was a bizarre situation. That said, both Su Qing and Xianxia had experienced things like this before. What was more, compared to what the captain was doing, whatever unseen enemies were on the way didn't count for much. Su Qing hadn't looked up to many people in his life. In the slums, he had admired his teacher. In the scavenger base camp, he had admired Sergeant Thunder and Grandmaster Bai. Now there was another person on that list. The difference was that when it came to the captain, what Su Qing admired was his crazy way of living dangerously. At a moment like this, the captain was going to the seafloor and risking his own life to get some of Join's flesh. It seemed like absolute insanity. As far as who the captain really was and what the true level of his cultivation base was, Su Qing didn't bother trying to speculate. There wasn't any point. "I hope you succeed, Captain," Su Qing whispered. The captain had given him 3 Foundation establishment pills in exchange for an incense stick's worth of protection, so Su Qing would keep him safe for that long. Without any hesitation, he headed toward the main entrance of the temple. At the door he looked out, then waved his hand, sending out a large collection of poison powder into the water. These powders weren't colorless. Instead, there were powders of many colors: black, red, blue, green, and more, which instantly combined into a multicolored, highly poisonous cloud. Meanwhile, the sizzling sounds and explosions from outside grew louder. Ripples appeared in the water, followed by a huge tentacle that shot directly toward Su Qing. It moved with incredible speed, sending out pulses of energy through the water as it did. There wasn't just one such tentacle. More followed, until there were dozens of them shooting in Su Qing's direction. Ice cold, he dodged the first tentacle, then slashed his dagger through it, completely severing it. Backing up a step, he engaged the next tentacle to reach him. Blood erupted everywhere, but there were so many tentacles trying to grab him that eventually he dropped his dagger, grabbed one of the tentacles, and pulled as hard as he could. Rumbling sounds could be heard as a huge crater opened up in the ground, and a bizarre beast was dragged out into the open. As it twitched and writhed, its head appeared, complete with a vicious mouth that lunged toward Su Qing. Su Qing remained calm as the spectral drought demon appeared behind him, and he struck the beast with a vicious punch. A boom caused the water to explode, and the beast collapsed. However, the fight wasn't over. Su Qing grabbed another tentacle, pulled the beast out into the open, and then punched it into oblivion. Further back inside the temple, Xianxia was breathing hard as he watched. Su Qing isn't quite as crazy as the captain, but he's definitely pretty ferocious. Xianxia wasn't just sitting around. His hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, causing nearly invisible threads to shoot out from him toward the outside. He was also taking part in the slaughter. More and more explosions could be heard from outside as Xianxia's traps continued to be sprung. Many enemies fell victim to Su Qing's poisons and were forced to show their faces. These newcomers were merfolk. However, they weren't like ordinary merfolk. They had the ability to turn invisible, and they were also unusually fierce. As they appeared, coughing up blood and showing other signs of being poisoned, they chose not to retreat, but instead charged toward the temple. Their target wasn't Su Qing, but rather the statue covered in flesh. In fact, they seemed to be going mad with the desire to stop the fluctuations coming from that flesh. However, the moment they burst into the entrance of the temple, a huge explosion occurred. They had walked right into one of Xianxia's traps. Su Qing wasn't hurt at all, but the merfolk were blown to bits. The explosion forced the rest of the merfolk back. As for Su Qing, who was still struggling with the tentacles, a look of shock appeared on his face. He had just sensed some powerful fluctuations, and could tell that an intense aura was approaching the temple from under the ground. "Elder Brother Xianxia, carry that statue out of here," he shouted. Xianxia reacted with lightning speed. Without the slightest hesitation, he ran back, threw the flesh-covered statue onto his shoulders and charged out of the temple. At the same time, his right hand danced, manipulating the sharp threads to swirl around him. Exactly as he burst out of the temple collapsed, and a massive, rotting hand exploded from the ground. Although it didn't grab anything, it did slap down onto the surface and then exert tremendous force to pull a huge, 300-meter-tall figure out of the ground. As it came up, powerful zombie poison spread out in all directions. Shockingly, this was a zombie creature, except it wasn't a single zombie, but rather a host of zombies all bunched together. Once out into the open, it crouched on all fours like an animal before charging toward Xianxia. Xianxia's expression flickered. Taking the statue from his shoulder, he tossed it toward Su Qing. Su Qing leaped up and grabbed it, then backed up. At the same time, he used his dagger left-handed to slash at something next to him. Blood bloomed as a head tumbled down. Meanwhile, the giant zombie shifted directions toward Su Qing. Su Qing's eyes narrowed. Picking up speed, he fled. Meanwhile, Xianxia borrowed some of Su Qing's speed to hurry after him. Su Qing wasn't surprised by that. The moment he caught the flesh-covered statue, he had sensed a thread connecting it to Xianxia. "What is that thing?" Xianxia asked as he got close. "It took the captain to the bottom of the sea, but it seems to have driven the merfolk and sea zombies mad." Su Qing didn't respond. He was thinking about what the captain had said about an incense stick's worth of time. He tossed the statue back to Xianxia. "Elder brother Xianxia, you hold the line here." Then, eyes erupting with killing intent, Su Qing gripped his dagger with his left hand and pulled out his black iron skewer with his right. As the spectral drought demon howled behind him, he charged toward the incoming giant zombie. He moved at top speed, and as he closed in, the spectral drought demon joined him to launch a strike. He also released plenty of poison. Under the force of his relentless attacks, individual sea zombies fell off of the giant composite zombie until it was falling back in retreat. Next, Su Qing summoned a host of water droplets to create a set of fetters to lock the giant creature in place. Then he waved his hand to summon his Dharma boat and unleash an attack of godliness. A golden beam of light appeared that seemed capable of purifying anything and everything. Shooting through the water, it landed right on the giant zombie. The giant thing trembled, then exploded into bits. Su Qing didn't want to waste the godliness he had. Putting away his Dharma boat, he turned, killing intent flickering in his eyes. Then he launched himself toward the other merfolk. His dagger danced, spreading blood everywhere. His iron skewer zipped about, piercing one merfolk after another. Though Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior was still sleeping, now that the iron skewer had a spirit automaton, it was an extraordinary and deadly weapon. A short time later, the entire area had been cleared by Su Qing. He was covered with blood, and he looked a bit tired, but his killing intent burned as intensely as ever. The iron skewer was in a similar state. It pulsed with a baleful aura, as well as a hint of foundation establishment. From the look of it, Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior would awaken soon. Behind Su Qing, the spectral drought demon looked around viciously as if to bear witness to the carnage. Off to the side stood Xianxia, who was deeply shaken. He saw Su Qing covered in blood, standing there like an unsheathed blade. And suddenly, he realized he'd made an error in judgment. Though Su Qing wasn't as crazy as the captain in terms of ferocity, he was on exactly the same level. That was especially true considering that all the bodies on the ground had their necks sliced open. Enough time had passed for an incense stick to burn, and the captain wasn't back. Su Qing stood there silently looking at the flesh-covered statue on Xianxia's shoulder. They waited long enough for another half an incense stick to burn. Even Xianxia was starting to think too much time had passed. He looked a bit gloomy. Some more time passed. Finally, Su Qing said, "Time's up, elder brother Xianxia. I have some other places to go. Take care of yourself." He gave Xianxia a bag of poison, told him how to use it, then turned and sped away. He hoped everything went well with the captain, but he wasn't going to just sit around waiting. He had more important things to take care of. After he was far enough away that he was sure he was alone, he took out the spirit breath lamp and put it into his shadow. Almost immediately, he was able to confirm which direction he needed to go. He continued moving through the huge temple complex. An hour later, he stopped in front of what appeared to be a very ordinary temple. Though it didn't seem any different from the surrounding buildings, this was where the spirit breath lamp was pointing to. After looking around and confirming he was alone, he took out some poison and scattered it around, making sure it covered the entire temple and even drifted inside. Even then, he didn't just go in. He waited for a while to see if anything happened. When nothing did, he finally cautiously entered the temple. There was nothing inside other than a statue. It was not a statue of Join. Instead, it depicted an old merman. He looked threatening without being angry and wore a royal crown on his head. Other than that, there didn't seem to be anything special about him. Su Qing looked around, even taking time to study the walls. However, the place was indeed empty, even the walls. After finding no clues, Su Qing took out the spirit breath lamp. Nothing happened. After some thought, he ignited the lamp and walked around the entire temple, yet still didn't notice anything noteworthy. He put some more thought into the matter, then put the lamp into his shadow. Almost instantly, the flame changed color, turning from amber to a pale green. As the light touched the walls, Su Qing realized they looked different. Eyes narrowing, he walked up to one of the walls. As he got close and the lamplight shone more directly on the wall in front of him, it rippled. Then, to his shock, a mural appeared on the wall. It depicted a massive altar piled high with so many bones they were like a sea. And atop that sea of bones towered three figures. Two of them were bowing, the other stood tall. One of the two bowing figures was the same old merman depicted in the statue in this temple. He looked like an emperor, regal, formidable, and out of the ordinary. On his head, he wore a royal crown covered with jewels. The other bowing figure was an old woman with a host of tentacles wearing a robe of fish skeletons. On her back was a ghost face. It was, of course, Join. As for the figure to whom they bowed, it was a giant, around whom coiled a huge nine-headed serpent. The giant wore a suit of armor covered with magical symbols. On each shoulder he carried a separate world, and a sword floated above his head. The sword looked extremely disturbing, as if it was powerful enough to sunder the heavens and crush the earth. In fact, this figure that the merfolk emperor and Join were bowing to seemed very much like a god. One of the serpentine mouths held a burning lamp. That lamp resembled an upside-down umbrella. In that respect, it looked like the spirit breath lamp. However, the feeling it let off made it seem like it was something far beyond the spirit breath lamp. That difference was like the difference between an ordinary rock and a piece of fine jade. And it exuded a royal might that ensured that anyone who looked at it would know that it was real and authentic. Su Qing looked at the mural, shaken in mind and heart as he saw the black umbrella glowing with such intensity it seemed real. In fact, the light coming from it emerged from the wall and spread out in all directions. At the same time, the spirit breath lamp Su Qing held glittered with even more intense light. Together the two fields of brightness created a surging, glowing sea. Su Qing's expression flickered as that light washed over him. Even if he had made the decision to back away, he wouldn't have had time. In the blink of an eye, the sea of light vanished, and Su Qing went along with it. Paradoxically, the process seemed to take a very long time, but also happened in an instant. Everything faded away from Su Qing's perspective. Then things started to grow clear again. The first thing he sensed was an absolutely terrifyingly mighty pressure, almost like the roar of an immensely powerful wild beast coming from straight ahead. There was clearly no sound, just the pressure, but nonetheless it caused Su Qing's ears to ring so badly he worried they might collapse. Blood even started oozing out of them. Then blood started dripping out of his nose, and his eyes hurt so badly he was having trouble opening them. It was worse inside of him, as his internal organs all started to tremble. Because of the intense pain and the fact that he couldn't open his eyes, he had no idea what was around him. All he could do was drop to his haunches and try to fight back against the pressure. He did sprinkle some poison powder around him, and also took out his iron skewer. Next, he didn't hesitate for an instant to release the sealing mark on Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. The moment the sealing mark was removed, a howl of grief erupted from the skewer. "I'm sorry, my lord, I'm really sorry. Where are we? Oh my God, this. My lord, you really didn't need to throw me in here to suffer endless torment. I'm familiar with the ancient records and have read the story of many characters who were punished like this. My lord, I swear that I've truly acknowledged allegiance to you. I really want to be your spirit automaton. Don't kill me. I'll follow orders. I know what I did was wrong. Okay, I confess that I actually have another spot with a spirit stone stockpile. Actually, I paid some fellow Taoists a lot of money to come track you down if I ever disappeared. I'll tell you who they are, my lord, and you can just kill them." "Shut up," Su Qing growled, still unable to open his eyes. "Just tell me where we are." The patriarch didn't dare to do anything but follow orders. After all, his life was in Su Qing's hands, as Su Qing could end him with a thought. Voice trembling, the patriarch said, "My lord, it looks like we're near some sort of altar. There are bones everywhere, a whole sea of bones. We're on an elevated spot and there's a staircase in front of us. It leads down to a narrow path that runs between two cliffs, and at the end of the path there's a circular altar. The sea of bones is in front of the altar. Oh my God, it's so huge. There are also three astonishing statues in front of the altar." "Are they standing in a row?" Su Qing asked. "No, only one of them is standing, the other two are kowtowing." Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior had no idea that he'd once again managed to save his own life. "Continue," Su Qing said. "The standing one is a giant with a nine-headed snake wrapped around him. He looks like a god. Holy moly, what is he? I feel like I'm going to go blind looking at him. If I wasn't a spirit automaton, I'd probably be blind. And there are two more in front of him. I'm sorry, my lord, really. What is this place?" As the patriarch continued to jabber, Su Qing reeled as he came to the conclusion that he was somehow inside the world of the mural. After mulling the matter over, he waved his hand to seal the patriarch again. Once everything went quiet, he just waited to acclimate to the environment. As enough time passed for an incense stick to burn, the violet crystal's powers of regeneration worked constantly. Eventually, he started getting used to the mighty pressure around him. He still felt pain, but didn't feel like his entire body was about to be crushed. And it took a lot of effort, but he managed to open his eyes and look around. Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior had described the place accurately. On the one hand, this place seemed like an enormous cave temple. On the other hand, it seemed like a different world. The stairs in front of him were enormous, like they hadn't been built for humans to walk. And in the middle of the sea of bones were three divine statues. The pressure that Su Qing could hardly tolerate was coming from the statues. As blood leaked out of the corners of his eyes, his pupils constricted because of the sight of the giant standing in the middle of the bones. In one of the nine-headed snake's mouths was the black umbrella lamp. The black umbrella lamp cast out glittering, scintillating light onto the two worlds that rested on the giant's shoulders, making them seem incredibly lifelike. Su Qing struggled to breathe, his heart pounded, and his mind spun as he stared at the black umbrella lamp. A life lamp. He'd had his speculations when he arrived in this place, but had been too out of sorts to think about it. But now he was certain that the black umbrella was actually a life lamp. As he thought back to what the captain had said about life lamps, an indescribable desire to acquire that lamp erupted in his heart. If word of this got out, the grand competition would end immediately, and this place would become the center of all attention. And the first people to come would be from the seven-sect coalition on the revered ancient mainland. It would lead to complete insanity. When compared to a life lamp, the entire merfolk species would be considered trivial. The merfolk obviously had no idea the life lamp was here. Otherwise, they could have given it to some powerful sect in return for protection from seven blood eyes. And Su Qing would never have had this chance if his shadow hadn't found this place and led him here. As he looked at the life lamp, his heart pounding, he chose not to do anything rash. Instead, he took a deep breath to calm himself and steady his nerves. Reaching up, he wiped the blood off his face. As the violet crystal continued to heal him, he realized he felt a lot better than earlier. After some more breathing and rest, he felt even better. Looking up at the lamp, his eyes flickered with determination. He cautiously walked forward until he was at the edge of the first of the massive steps. Then he dropped down to the second step. The moment he landed, the pressure suddenly grew vastly more intense than before. His entire body trembled, and blood sprayed out of his mouth. As his face turned pale, he immediately got into a cross-legged position to stabilize his breathing. After some time passed, he started to recover. Gritting his teeth, he kept walking forward, shaking the entire time. Blood oozed out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and his bones felt like they might shatter. Eventually, he reached the end of the second step. At that point, he felt like he had reached his limit. He was even having trouble seeing. He was certain that he couldn't continue, and had the feeling that if he dropped to the third step, something even more terrifying would happen. But then he looked up and stared at the life lamp. He just couldn't bear to leave without it, so he looked back down at the ground. Because of the light from up ahead, his shadow wasn't visible in front of him. Looking back at the shadow behind him, he narrowed his eyes and said, "Wake up. You like extinguishing lamps, right? I've got one right here for you." As he spoke, he took control of his shadow. It twitched, almost as if it wasn't willing to move from its spot behind him. But then it slowly crept forward. The bright light made his shadow so faint it almost wasn't visible, but he knew it was there, and under his control it slid down to the third step. Su Qing felt no adverse effects. Eyes glittering, he stretched his shadow out to the fourth step, then the fifth. Eventually, it reached the altar, where it continued through the sea of bones to the three statues. Su Qing actually wasn't sure how far his shadow could stretch, but he could tell that the further it went, the more effort he had to expend to control it. At the same time, the shadow was growing unstable, which made it even more difficult to control. As it closed in on the statues, it was so unstable in Su Qing's mind that he didn't think he could push it any farther. His eyes were bloodshot as he looked at the life lamp and then checked his shadow. Unfortunately, he had only one option left. Tapping into the violet crystal, he used the power of suppression on the shadow, hoping it would make it a bit longer. It was an option when he was out of options. And yet, before the power of suppression could even be fully unleashed, the unstable shadow suddenly twitched and, as if tapping into power it didn't even possess, stretched out even farther. It reached the statue of the giant, stretching up it until it was almost touching the life lamp in the snake's mouth. However, this time, the shadow had really reached its limit and was visibly trembling and starting to break apart. It didn't matter how much more Su Qing suppressed it, he couldn't go any further. What was more, it looked like it was about to start shrinking back. Su Qing inhaled sharply. He just wasn't sure that he could actually trust his shadow. For all he knew, it was doing this on purpose and actually could reach the lamp. "If you don't get that lamp," he said calmly, "then after I leave this place, I'll suppress you 1,000 times, even if I die in the process." Though his voice was calm, the shadow could sense the deadly intent in his voice. Trembling, it tried to push itself farther, but clearly was incapable of doing so. It was really starting to break apart now. At this point, Su Qing finally believed that his shadow was at its limit. However, decisiveness still gleamed in his eyes as he took out a talisman treasure, as well as his Dharma boat, whose defenses he activated. Climbing onto the Dharma boat, he took out a huge quantity of spirit stones and loaded them into the spell formation magazine to bolster the defenses. Taking a deep breath, he sent the Dharma boat forward until it was over the third step. As the Dharma boat moved, the shadow advanced, closing the distance to the lamp in the snake's mouth. The shadow touched the lamp and tightened around it. Before Su Qing could confirm whether or not he'd succeeded, the advance of the Dharma boat caused a massive rumbling sound to build up, louder than anything from before. It exploded from in front of him like rolling thunder, turning into a mountain-toppling, sea-draining force that slammed right into him. His Dharma boat couldn't stand up to the force, and the sails, which were the first line of defense, ripped apart and the Dharma boat tumbled backward. Then the second set of defenses collapsed, and all of the spirit stones were drained and subsequently shattered. The Dharma boat tumbled backward even more rapidly. Next, the force hit the prow, and the godliness from the lizard skin erupted out, but not even that could stand up to the rumbling force. Starting at the prow, the Dharma boat crumbled until it was half destroyed. As the Dharma boat suffered grievous damage, the force reached Su Qing, who was surrounded by the protection of a host of talisman treasures. They fought back wildly against the attacking force, but the calligraphy on the paper rapidly grew faint, then disappeared. Then the force hit Su Qing. He trembled violently. It felt like he was being struck by an entire mountain, causing enormous amounts of blood to spray from his mouth. Many of his bones shattered and his flesh was ripped to shreds. By then, his Dharma boat had tumbled back as far as it could go, and glittering light rose up everywhere. Back on Join Island in the Merfolk Isles, Su Qing and his Dharma boat shot out from the mural. The massive force which had assailed him propelled him all the way across the temple to the opposite wall, which collapsed. The Dharma boat left a huge, 300-meter furrow in the ground all the way back to the mural. Su Qing was still coughing up mouthful after mouthful of blood. In many places his flesh was shredded so badly his bones were visible, and of course many of those bones were broken. There was a huge wound in his stomach that pierced through his entire torso, and most of his clothing had been shredded off. He was surrounded in blood and could hardly see. He had never been injured this badly. However, his right hand was tightly clenched onto something. It was the life lamp that his shadow had successfully grabbed. "I can't pass out." As his vision swam, he bit his tongue hard and forced his eyes to stay open. From inside his bag of holding, he produced a huge handful of medicinal pills. Not wanting to waste time eating them, he shoved them directly into the wound on his belly. He also scattered some poison powder around him, just in case any enemies showed up. There was no time to inspect the life lamp. He immediately put it into the pearl of holding he'd acquired from Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. Then he put the pearl of holding into a bag of holding, yet still wasn't convinced that was safe enough, so he put the bag of holding into another bag of holding. Hopefully, burying the bag in so many layers would prevent its aura from seeping out. There was only a bit of godliness left in his Dharma boat, and though he hated to lose it, now wasn't the time to be miserly. Using the godliness, he created a defensive barrier around himself. As he accomplished that, he coughed up another mouthful of blood. He now felt so weak he was certain death was calling for him. Thankfully, the violet crystal within him glittered as it sent its power throughout his body. His entire body thrummed with intense pain, to the point where he couldn't hold back from moaning. Gritting his teeth to stay conscious, he endured the pain as he waited for the violet crystal to heal him. Su Qing had never even come close to being this badly injured. Both of his Dharma boat's lines of defense had been destroyed, and even though he fought back with godliness, the front half of the boat was crushed. He had used a large number of talisman treasures as well, and had fought back with every scrap of his great circle fleshly body strength. Despite all that, he barely made it out alive. In fact, he could tell that even with the violet crystal's powers of regeneration, it would take quite some time before he was back to normal. Fear still lingered in his heart despite the fact that he'd made his escape. He had the feeling that if he'd been missing even a single line of defense, then he would be dead right now. But it was worth it, he murmured as he gritted his teeth against the pain. Then he decided to take a quick inventory. He didn't care as much about the talisman treasures as he did his Dharma boat, which he had worked so hard to upgrade. Right now, it had almost no godliness left. The front half was almost completely destroyed. It was going to cost a lot to get it back in shape. Even still, he was extremely excited at how much he had benefited. And I still have the knockoff spirit breath lamp. Now I understand why the captain was willing to put everything on the line. As long as you succeed, the rewards are spectacular. That said, Su Qing didn't think it was a good idea to make a practice of this sort of thing. Otherwise, he really would end up dead one day. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to calm down, then circulated his cultivation base and tried to get the violet crystal to heal him faster. At the moment, he couldn't even move, and knew that the longer he stayed in place, the more danger he would be in. Before long, an hour had passed. \\\\. Some distance away from Su Qing, but still within the bounds of the temple complex, was an area where someone had dug out a small cave in the ground. Inside the cave was a flesh-covered statue, and sitting next to it was Xianxia. Xianxia was guarding the entrance of the cave. Outside were a host of explosive devices, as well as a lot of poison. Anyone who tried to approach would have a hard time not dying while doing so. Leaving the cave would be tricky, but Xianxia had left a path and knew how to tread it. But not even all those preparations were good enough for Xianxia, so he had spread his thread weapon throughout the area as well. Occasionally, he would look back at the flesh-covered statue and sigh. "Come on, Captain. You're not going to die inside there, are you? Did you really have to do this? Why are you so interested in risking your poor little life? Wouldn't you rather have some fun with some of the girls back in the sect?" That was Join. She might not be a real god, but she's a terrifying godly entity. None of the merfolk are on her level, except for maybe that Miga, although who knows if he's even real. "Don't die on me, Captain. If you do, then all these years of investments in you will have been for nothing." Xianxia had been sighing in this manner for about 4 hours, and had already resigned himself to the fact that the captain was probably dead. Shaking his head, he decided that he would wait for the time it takes an incense stick to burn, and if the captain didn't come out by then, he would stop waiting. Looking around, he was contemplating whether or not he should cut off a chunk of flesh from the statue to keep as a souvenir, when suddenly the statue trembled. And then, a cry echoed out from inside that made Xianxia shiver. Expression flickering, he backed up, while simultaneously manipulating his thread weapon to surround the statue. Then the statue trembled again and the crevice in the flesh split open, growing larger and then smaller, then back and forth between those two states, as if it were breathing. The howling inside also grew clearer. It seemed like some terrifying creature was inside, trying to get out. Astonished, Xianxia backed up again, until he was at the entrance of the cave, ready to flee at any moment. As he waited there nervously, the flesh on the statue twitched, and a hand stretched out from inside. It was covered in blood and only had 3 fingers attached. Most of the skin was flayed off, making the bones clearly visible. The hand gripped the flesh on the statue and used it to struggle out from inside. Eventually, the captain's torso appeared. He had no hair, and his head was completely covered in blood. Most of the skin on his face was melted off, and all the bloody flesh made it seem like he wasn't even human. He was covered in all sorts of ghastly wounds, some of which pierced all the way through him. However, his right hand was tightly gripping a wriggling chunk of golden flesh. From the terrifying godliness that radiated off of the bloody flesh, it was obvious that it was Join's flesh. As soon as the flesh was out in the open, the air around it rippled and distorted, and seemed to fill with countless agonized shrieks. Xianxia's mind spun, and blood oozed out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. His entire body felt unstable. "Pull me out," the captain said urgently. It took effort, but Xianxia wrapped his thread around the captain, then pulled. Slowly but surely, the captain's torso emerged from the crevice in the statue. Then he dropped to the ground. His lower half, including both legs, was gone. Only his upper half remained, though it was all a mass of mangled flesh. "Hurry up and destroy the statue," the captain cried. "There's something behind me." At the same time, he performed a one-handed incantation gesture and pointed at the statue. Xianxia could sense the danger, so he gritted his teeth and joined in the effort. Booms rang out as they attacked the flesh-covered statue. A moment later, it exploded. As it was destroyed, A howl of rage echoed out from inside. The mere echo of that howl caused blood to spray from Xianxia's mouth, and he staggered backward. Cracking sounds emanated out from him as upwards of 40 jade slips on him shattered. Then he fell to the ground, heavily injured. After struggling to produce some medicinal pills, he consumed them. Only then did some of the color return to his face. The captain also coughed up blood as he tumbled off to the side. However, he didn't let go of the chunk of flesh. After it was all over, he laughed uproariously. "Who else could have done this but me?" he said excitedly. "As soon as I heard about the attack on the Merfolk Isles, I hatched this plan, and now I finally got some flesh from a godly entity. I pulled it off. I really pulled it off this time." Grimacing in pain but still chuckling, he quickly put away Join's flesh. "Was it worth it?" Xianxia asked, smiling wryly. "You lost your legs in the process." "It was worth it. Who cares about half a body? I specifically cultivated a secret magic for regrowing lost limbs. Couple that with some of the best medicine from the sect, and I'll have my legs back in a few months. And with the godliness from Join's flesh, I'll recover even faster." The captain looked around. "Hey, where's the deputy captain?" Continuing to consume some medicinal pills, Xianxia said, "You told us to wait for the time it takes an incense stick to burn. That was 4 hours ago. Junior brother Su stood guard for 2 incense sticks worth of time. When you didn't come back, he went to take care of some other things. Before he left, he gave me a bunch of poison powders." "That makes sense. Even I didn't think I would be in there that long, and I almost didn't make it back." The captain produced an apple, took a bite, and was about to continue explaining what happened when a huge rumbling sound reached their ears. In fact, all of Join Island shook down to its core, so violently that all of the buildings collapsed. At the same time, streams of black mist emerged from the buildings, the seagrass, and the anemones. Massive amounts of it seeped out of everything in the underwater world, and as it congregated together, it turned into black clouds that rolled out in all directions. The mutagen it contained was so strong it melted everything it touched. What was more, there was something ghoulish in it that, when it touched the mangled corpses in the underwater world, caused them to come back to life. More black mist seeped out, and it made the black clouds thicker and thicker, covering everything. Seeing this development, the 7 Blood-Eyes disciples in the underwater world reacted with shock. Without any hesitation, all of them rushed toward the exits. The ground trembled as if dragons were hidden in the earth, to the point where the captain's torso fell over. Barely managing to keep his apple in his mouth, he scrambled to climb up Xianxia's back. "The merfolk are finally using their ultimate trump card. I took too long getting back. Hurry, we have to get out of here. Get us to the exit." As the black mist surged toward them, Xianxia started running toward the exit. \\\\\. In another part of the temple complex, the violet crystal had healed Su Qing enough that he opened his eyes. When he sensed the rumbling and saw the black clouds gathering, his pupils constricted. Without the slightest hesitation, he put away his Dharma boat, which was so badly damaged it couldn't fly. Gritting his teeth, he started running. Only moments after he left, black clouds filled the area where he had been recuperating. Because of the masses of black mist, no one could possibly see that, on the seemingly blank walls of the temple, the mural was glittering, almost as if it wanted to reveal itself. However, the merfolk emperor in the mural slowly faded away and disappeared. All of the 7 Blood-Eyes disciples under the water were now rushing to escape. Dramatic things were also happening in the outside world. Black clouds weren't just appearing on Join Island. They were also present on Image Island, Miga Island, and Nethervault Island. From a distance, it looked like all 4 islands were being covered with black clouds. This was the final trump card the merfolk had to play. High in the air on his dreadnought, Master Seventh looked down at the Merfolk Isles and the spell formation covering them. Although the spell formation blocked physical sight, he could sense what was happening. However, instead of causing a serious expression to appear on his face, it prompted him to turn to the Merfolk Patriarch and laugh. "Nice. You're finally doing something impressive. And here I was worried that this competition was going to be too easy for these wolf pups. Up to this point, it was hardly a competition. It was more like you just giving us gifts. Thankfully, you do have some fight in you. Now that the difficulty has been ramped up, the wolf pups are finally going to face some real danger." In the undersea world beneath Join Island, Su Qing felt immense pain with every move he made. The wounds on his arms, legs, and belly kept ripping open and bleeding. What was left of his tattered Taoist robe was soaked with blood. Though he had spirit-powered defenses around him, preventing the sea water from reaching his wounds, he still felt racked with pain. He had been injured so badly that not even the violet crystal had the ability to heal him in a short time. Black mist seethed around him. Su Qing wasn't worried about the mutagen it contained, but he was worried about the intense zombie poison within it. Given his current state, if he got infected with zombie poison, the power of the violet crystal wouldn't be able to neutralize it. He also saw corpses within the black clouds getting back to their feet. Howling like beasts, they began to run amok. One thing was for sure, if that black mist reached him, he would be in a deadly crisis. He had to get away quickly. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he picked up speed. He had no options other than to endure the pain. In fact, he even used a flight talisman as he sped toward the exit. It wasn't just his fleshly body that had taken damage. His spirit power was almost completely drained. Given he was in such dangerous circumstances, he needed to conserve what little spirit power he had left in case he got into a fight. Thus, he resorted to using a flight talisman rather than tap into his cultivation base. Enough time passed for an incense stick to burn, whereupon he emerged from the temple complex. Looking around, he saw that the black mist was everywhere. It filled the temples and coral buildings. Everything was being consumed by it. There hadn't been many living people in this area to begin with, and now there were none at all. There were only the howling zombies. Su Qing's expression was grim as he realized that the black clouds seemed to be coming from the sea floor, which meant he couldn't escape in that direction. Having no other choice, he started speeding along on the ground. Unfortunately, the exit was just too far away. After proceeding for the time it takes an incense stick to burn, the clouds were building up to the point where he couldn't avoid them. As soon as they enveloped him, his spirit-powered defenses started corroding. What was more, he was now having a hard time seeing things clearly. The howls of the zombies grew louder and more distinct. Eyes flashing with killing intent, he waved his right hand, and his iron skewer shot out toward one of the zombies. This zombie looked different from the sea zombies. It was a Seven Blood Eyes disciple who had been killed. Now he was pitch black, both his skin and his eyes. And even after Su Qing's iron skewer slashed through his throat and his head fell to the ground, he still reached out toward Su Qing with claw-like hands. Su Qing's left hand flashed in an incantation gesture, and a screen of water spread out, then shoved the zombie back by about 30 meters. Su Qing didn't waste time on further fighting. There were more howls coming closer. Eyes filled with determination, he performed an incantation gesture with his left hand, causing countless water droplets around him to form into a snake-necked dragon. After appearing, the snake-necked dragon quickly grew to 300 meters, wrapped around Su Qing, then howled as it carried him forward. As they moved, the snake-necked dragon would slap aside any zombies that got in their way. This was Su Qing's final trump card. If the snake-necked dragon were to be destroyed, then it would be a big challenge escaping. Thankfully, the snake-necked dragon was capable of astonishing levels of speed and was strong enough to barrel through any resistance. The corroding effect of the black clouds ate away at it, causing it to shrink, but Su Qing had stored up a lot of spirit power in it. As a result, the snake-necked dragon kept Su Qing moving through the clouds, getting closer and closer to the exit. Along the way, he saw a few Seven Blood Eyes disciples struggling to fight their way to freedom. None of them paid any attention to him. However, as he got closer to the exit, he also got closer to areas where the fighting had been fierce, and a lot of cultivators had been killed. Therefore, the howling of the zombies grew more intense. The Seven Blood Eyes disciples who had made it this far were going to have a tough time dealing with the sea of zombies. Grim-faced, Su Qing performed a double-handed incantation gesture, then threw his hands out. The snake-necked dragon shrank down, withering as its spirit power flowed into Su Qing, restoring some of his lost reserves. Unfortunately, that resulted in him losing the snake-necked dragon. There was no other option. By the time the snake-necked dragon disappeared, his spirit power reserves had been restored by about half. He was still badly wounded, but at least his battle prowess was restored to an extent. Performing an incantation gesture, he caused water droplets to circulate around him, and then he charged forward, leaping directly over the sea of zombies. When the occasional zombie tried to intercept him, he would sacrifice some of his water droplets to encase them in water and prevent them from reaching him. As he moved along, and as he trapped one zombie after another, he eventually caught sight of the exit. However, that was also when he suddenly looked to the side to see a figure rushing in his direction. As this person ran, they tossed out random traps that would instantly explode, and on his back was another person who was calling out in a familiar voice. "Go, go, go, Xianxia, right, throw them like that and blow them up." Yo, you threw that one in the wrong direction. You should have thrown it that way. The person running was Xianxia, and the person yelling was the captain. Xianxia gasped for breath as he sprinted. On his back, the captain was laughing as if he wasn't worried at all about their current circumstances. "Shut up," Xianxia yelled. "Huh, Xianxia, how could you use such a tone on someone that used to be your captain?" Taking out an apple, he took a bite. "If you don't keep your mouth shut, I'll throw you down and you can run the rest of the way on your own. Go, Xianxia, go." An odd expression appeared on Su Qing's face as he watched Xianxia running toward him with the captain on his back. Seeing that the captain was missing his lower half, he once again was struck by how crazy the captain was. When Xianxia finally saw Su Qing, his eyes went wide. Sending his thread whipping out, he used it to grab onto Su Qing and then pull himself toward him. Then the captain noticed Su Qing's wounds and his tattered Taoist robe, and his eyes went wide. "Yo, Deputy Captain Su, look at the state you're in. You must have accomplished something amazing. You look drained. Don't tell me you found the sleeping chamber of the mermaid princess and she wore you out." Meanwhile, Su Qing looked at the captain's missing lower half and calmly asked, "Will it grow back?" "I'm not worried about it," the captain said proudly. "I'll be shipshape in no time once we get back." "All right," Su Qing said coolly. "I'll give you a feather when we're back at the sect." "Feather? Why would you give me a feather?" The captain looked completely confused. "My God, now's not the time for chatting," Xianxia snapped. "We need to get out of here." As far as Xianxia was concerned, both Su Qing and the captain were freaks. After all, who else would sit around chatting in such dangerous circumstances? Looking away from the captain and his damaged body, Su Qing started moving again. Xianxia used his thread to borrow momentum from Su Qing, and thus the two and a half of them rushed into the exit and then disappeared. Not long after they left, the black clouds inundated the entire area. Although the entire underwater world had been filled with the clouds, things weren't over yet. Soon, the clouds started seeping onto the surface of the islands as well, moving through the tunnels and various other passages. The poison Su Qing had laced the water with had mostly dissipated already, though he wasn't sure if it was naturally or by some other means. After moving through the tunnel for the time it takes half an incense stick to burn, he broke the surface of the water and flew out into the open with the power of the flight talisman. Xianxia was right behind him, also moving with a flight talisman. Meanwhile, the captain was talking nonstop. "What did you mean about the feather, Su Qing?" he asked. Su Qing didn't respond. "Deputy Captain Su, don't forget you owe me 8,000 spirit stones. Now tell me what you mean about the feather." Ignoring him, Su Qing looked around at the outside world, felt wind on his face, and suddenly looked surprised. Xianxia reacted in the same way. They were surrounded by chaos and whipping winds. Black clouds were rising up everywhere, creating huge pillars that looked like dragons, connected to the spell formation above. There were 8 such pillars in total, 2 per island. Countless streams of black mist on the ground fed into the 8 pillars, and as Su Qing, Xianxia, and the captain watched, the pillar nearest them began to transform. Started at the very top, it split into multiple parts, with each part coming to resemble the head of a snake. In total, there were 9 heads, and after they formed, they let loose howls that caused the earth to quake. The howls caused boundless mutagen and zombie poison to emerge from the ground. Meanwhile, the howling of the serpents grew more intense, as if it might be able to pierce through the 7 blood eyes formation. In fact, it seemed to be climbing toward the gold core level. The scene caused Su Qing's mind to spin, as he realized he recognized this huge snake. It was the same snake that had been wrapped around the giant in the mural. The other 7 pillars were undergoing the same transformation, and as they howled, the mutagen in the Merfolk Isles grew vastly more intense. Merfolk and 7 Blood Eyes disciples alike all began to corrode under its strength. At the same time, countless corpses opened their eyes as they were resurrected. The Merfolk Isles were in chaos. The mutagen continued its assault, and the zombie poison spread more and more. The surviving merfolk cultivators had vicious expressions as they fought with even more ferocity than before. It almost seemed like they hoped to take all the 7 Blood Eyes disciples with them into death. However, those surviving merfolk cultivators soon realized that something unusual was going on. The 8 9-headed serpents looming above the 4 islands were getting stronger and stronger. The mutagen and zombie poison was impressive, and more resurrected corpses became zombies. However, the 7th Peak disciples all seemed prepared for such things. In fact, they were all popping white boluses like they were candy. Many had talisman treasures designed to provide temporary protection from mutagen, and they didn't hesitate to use them. Some dug into their surroundings, hoping to simply stay out of sight of the zombies and power through the mutagen and zombie poison. Most such individuals had extraordinary cultivation bases. Some of the disciples produced their dharma boats and stayed inside while watching what was happening outside. Few disciples took out pre-built defensive spell formations and called out to other nearby disciples that they could join them inside for a fee. Most outrageous of all was a group of disciples on Emmich Island who had somehow taken control of a group of several dozen zombies and had stationed them in a perimeter to absorb the mutagen and zombie poison. They didn't look like they were worried about the situation at all, and were even inviting other disciples to join them in safety. Just about everything imaginable could be seen. There were some disciples who actually slipped into the sea of zombies to pickpocket their bags of holding, or to set up ways to lure the zombies away and ambush them. All in all, it didn't seem like any of the disciples were worried about the nine-headed snakes. More precisely, they weren't going to let the terrifying snakes impede their efforts to make money. What seemed to worry them most was the possibility of not making a profit. Their attitude seemed to be, either kill me or get out of my way while I make money. Seeing this caused waves of shock and helplessness to rock the merfolk cultivators. However, it didn't take long for them to realize what was happening. High in the sky, Master Seventh on his dreadnought had initially seemed excited about the competition becoming more difficult. However, when he saw the 8 nine-headed dragons, his eyes glittered, and he shoved his hand down toward them. Instantly, 3 of the dragons let out howls of grief as they collapsed, turning into masses of black clouds that flew toward Master Seventh. As they gathered into his hand, his expression became one of delight. Well, isn't this interesting? The 13 gold core cultivators were also surprised and tried to collect their own samples. The spell formation made that difficult, but all of them managed to get bits of the black mist. As for the 100 Foundation establishment cultivators, they joined in the effort, with some of them even flying right up to the spell formation in the hopes of acquiring some of the mist. Because of that, the 5 remaining snakes all seemed to weaken. One of them even withered so badly that it screamed in anguish and then vanished from existence. As for the other 4, they were drained so badly that they fell from the gold core level to early Foundation establishment. However, the process didn't stop at that point. It just slowed down. When the merfolk patriarch saw what was happening, and how the 7 blood eyes cultivators were so excited, he fell into despair. "Oh, how mighty 7 blood eyes is," he muttered. "The sect changed after Xianxia became peak lord of the 7th peak. It changed. Everything changed." When the 7 blood eyes disciples saw what was happening, many of them joined forces to attack the huge snakes. On Join Island, Ding Ziohai's clothes were tattered, but he looked as energetic and imposing as ever. He was the first one to charge toward the snake outside the fish skeleton city. 3 other disciples joined him. That said, the other 3 just seemed to want riches, while Ding Ziohai wanted the kill. Booms rang out, and as Su Qing watched, he noticed that among the 3 disciples, all of whom had extraordinary cultivation bases, there was one young woman in a gray Taoist robe who was particularly eye-catching. She was petite but bewitchingly charming. Her face was as beautiful as a lotus flower, her eyebrows were like willow leaves, and she had eyes more seductive than peach blossoms. Her long, beautiful hair flowed around her, and her red lips were slightly parted, making her seem extraordinarily attractive. Though her Taoist robe was voluminous as she moved, it was possible to see her slender waist and dramatic curves. Her looks made her exactly the kind of person who attracted a lot of attention. Upon seeing her, Zhang San gulped. However, the pressure from the huge snake left him feeling shaken, and he had the feeling that if he got hit by that snake, he would be crushed to death. Su Qing did not have any such reaction. He was more interested in the 9-headed snake, which looked exactly like the one he remembered from the mural. Not only was he shocked, but also felt the need to be very careful. If this snake was here, then what if the giant with the 2 worlds on his shoulders also showed up? As for the captain, he finally stopped asking Su Qing about the feather. As he perched on Zhang San's back, he stared at the huge snake, his eyes shining. "That thing's amazing. Look at how strong that living mutagen is. It would be the perfect weapon for treacherous people. It's being suppressed by the spell formation, which makes it much easier to deal with. Anybody who manages to take it down and sell it would get rich overnight. The Ampik bigwigs would trip over themselves to buy it. I honestly can't believe that Ding Ziohai, who normally acts so honest and upright, would actually try to fight over something like that. No way, I have to get this thing. Come on, Zhang San, let's go." Zhang San's face twitched, and then he started walking in the exact opposite direction. Don't be scared, Zhang San. Come on, let's go. That thing is pure money. How about I put you down and you can crawl over there yourself? Zhang San shot back. The captain sighed and looked at Su Qing. Su Qing, you go over there. That thing is totally worth it. Su Qing ignored him. The treasure he had hidden on him was so dangerous that, as soon as the competition was over, he planned to leave this place and try to reach Foundation establishment as soon as possible. Seeing that Su Qing wasn't doing anything, the captain sighed heavily several times in a row. Taking a bite of his half-eaten apple, he looked longingly at the huge snake. From the look of sorrow on his face, one might think he was watching someone steal something that belonged to him. Meanwhile, the bewitchingly charming young woman who was fighting the snake alongside Ding Xiaohai seemed to realize people were looking in her direction. As she danced nimbly around the snake, she looked over to see Su Qing and the others standing off in the distance. When she saw Su Qing, her face lit up, and she gave him a nod as if in greeting. When he didn't seem to notice, her flight talisman glittered as she abandoned the fight with the snake and flew over to him. Su Qing instantly went on guard, pulling out his iron skewer and preparing some poison powder. Considering they were strangers coming together by chance, the fact that she was rushing toward him seemed suspicious. When Zhang San saw what was happening and realized Su Qing might release some poisons, he quickly put some distance between the two of them while simultaneously keeping his eye on the girl. The captain's eyes narrowed, and he smiled enigmatically. "Hello, elder brother," the young woman said, apparently not even noticing that Su Qing seemed ready to take action. Running up to him, she extended her right hand, within which was a small bottle with some black mist in it. It was none other than some of the huge snake's flesh. "Elder brother, I'm Linger from the Intelligence Division. I have a question I'd like to ask you. If you answer it, I'll give you this chunk of flesh. Sound good?" Her voice sounded like the singing of birds. However, she didn't seem adept at reading facial expressions, as before Su Qing could respond to her request, she immediately asked her question. "Elder brother, do you A, like snakes in general, or B, like eating snake gallbladders?" Then she stood there looking at him with keen expectation, and completely ignoring the captain and Zhang San. It was as if this was a question she had been pondering for a very long time. Zhang San looked at this petite young woman who was almost ridiculously attractive, and then he looked at Su Qing. In his heart, he sighed. Meanwhile, Su Qing frowned and instinctively took a few steps away from Linger. It seemed like a very unusual question, so he kept his guard up and cautiously replied, "Snake gall bladders are too bitter." "So that means you like snakes in general." Her eyes lit up even more. Apparently, she also wasn't adept at hiding her feelings, as a look of joy appeared on her face, and she twirled excitedly in a circle. Tossing the bottle to Su Qing, she turned and raced back to rejoin the fight with the nine-headed snake. The captain, still perched on Zhang San's back, looked at the little bottle that was now in Su Qing's hands, and then at the young woman running back toward the snake. "Junior Sister Linger, you can ask me a question too. Hey, 3 questions is fine. Even 10. Linger looked over her shoulder and stuck her tongue out at him, then kept running toward the huge snake. Looking angry, the captain slapped the top of Zhang San's head. "What gives? I'm just as good looking. 10 questions isn't much of a difference from the 1 question she asked Su Qing." "You want to know what gives?" Zhang San said. "You're missing your lower half, that's what gives." The captain seemed inclined to argue back, but then Zhang San moved his hands up as if to throw the captain on the ground, so he didn't say anything. And thus, time slipped by slowly but surely. The Onpeak cultivators continued to extract bits of the 4 snakes through the spell formation, and the snakes grew weaker. Coupled with the fact that the disciples on the island could tell how valuable the snakes were, they swarmed like wolf cubs to join in destroying them. When the last of the snakes was destroyed, the competition was over. The spell formation up above was opened, and sunlight once again spilled onto the battle-damaged surfaces of the islands, and the disciples with their bulging bags of loot. More than half of the disciples who had participated lost their lives, but the survivors' eyes shone brightly in the light of the sun. Su Qing was among them, looking up at the cultivators in the sky and the figure atop the head of the dreadnought. "You did well," Master Seventh said proudly. "I imagine the 7th peak will have some new Foundation establishment cultivators soon. Congratulations in advance." Master Seventh's words officially ended the 7th peak's grand competition in the Merfolk Isles. This time, the merfolk didn't have the opportunity or right to become allies. Well over half of the merfolk were dead, and their top experts had been suppressed and enslaved. All of the wealth on the 4 islands had been plundered. Of course, it was to be expected that a species such as the merfolk would have other wealth and treasure hidden away. That said, those were things that the off-peak chi condensation disciples couldn't deal with. Although the spell formation had suppressed everything on the islands, there were still many private chambers and reserve items that chi condensation cultivators couldn't detect. One could only imagine the windfall the 7th Peak Foundation establishment cultivators were about to experience. 7 Blood Eyes has won a major victory, the captain said, still perched on Xianxia's back. We killed many birds with 1 stone. He threw his head back and laughed, though that seemed to aggravate his injuries. He quickly took out a new apple and took a bite, and the look of pain disappeared. Apparently, eating apples helped him stop thinking about the pain. How many birds? Xianxia asked. It was the same question Su Qing had been thinking about. Making the Merfolk Isles the location of the 7th Peak's grand competition was just the tip of the iceberg. First, the off-peak disciples got their share of plunder. Next, the Foundation establishment will get their share. And finally, the gold cores will carry out the 3rd round of looting. After that, the old man will come in for the 4th and final round. Everything the merfolk have been saving up over the years will be taken away. That's the first bird down. After that are all the secret agendas. For instance, the merfolk were just bait to draw out the sea zombies. Once their teleportation portal was open, our patriarch, who had just experienced a breakthrough and was ravenous, got to fill himself up. That was the 2nd bird. Everything that happened will provide an overt warning to all other non-humans, showing them how powerful 7 Blood Eyes is. That was the 3rd bird. Amazing. And then we come to the 4th bird. The Merfolk Isles are halfway between 7 Blood Eyes and the sea zombies. It's the perfect staging ground for war, and war is coming. Soon. Su Qing had been missing a few key pieces of information, so the captain's analysis was very enlightening. However, there was still something he didn't understand. Why was the patriarch hungry after his breakthrough? You don't want to know, the captain said, giving him a meaningful glance. Around then, Master 7th looked contentedly downward and waved his hand. His dreadnought roared to heaven and then spat out a flow of violet light. It spread out, becoming a sea of light that covered all 4 islands and started a teleportation. When the rumbling sounds echoed out, Su Qing finally started to relax. A moment later, he and all the other disciples vanished as they were teleported back to the 7 Blood Eyes headquarters. After they were gone, the Foundation establishment cultivators looked down with glittering eyes. Master 7th glanced at them and smiled. Go, he said. Instantly, 100 beams of light shot down to the 4 islands. If these Foundation establishment cultivators didn't get their chance at some profit, they would not have been happy. The grand competition was limited to chi condensation cultivators, and thus, they hadn't been very interested in the proceedings. But now was their chance to get some loot. \\\\. In midair above the central altar in the 7 Blood Eyes capital city, a violet sea of light appeared, creating a huge circle. Within the circle appeared all the 7th Peak disciples, who floated down to the ground. It was only now that Su Qing realized that there weren't even 2,000 people present. As for those who were present, they all pulsed with murderous auras. 4,000 went, and barely half came back. It really hammered home the point that the 7 Blood Eyes grand competition was a brutal event. After landing, he looked around and wasn't able to spot Xianxia and the captain. Though the returning disciples all had murderous auras, they also looked excited. Everyone had obviously profited significantly. Su Qing spotted Huang Yan in the crowd. He had ended up going to a different island than Su Qing. Right now, he stood there with his eyebrows dancing in delight. He had 7 or 8 bags of holding on his belt and looked very high and mighty. Noticing Su Qing, he hurried over. How'd you do? Did you make out well? I certainly did. Su Qing nodded. However, he was still racked with pain and felt incredibly weak and tired. Huang Yan was about to continue talking when another figure emerged from the violet sea of light. The instant the person appeared, his cultivation base fluctuations weighed down on the entire area, causing all the disciples to go silent and look up. That included Su Qing. Above he saw Zhao Jingheng's grandfather, the 7th Peak's 3rd elder. There are still matters to attend to on the Merfolk Isles, 3rd elder said. The Peak Lord needs to wait there for the patriarch to return. Therefore, since the grand competition is over, I will announce the results. Your kill count was recorded in your identity medallion. Don't worry, the medallions don't keep track of the items you looted. They're not capable of doing that. Whatever you took is yours. Historically, the grand competitions have always been like that. The sect won't pry into your business, and now the time has come to announce the winner. Ding Ziohai stepped forward. Ding Ziohai rose up into the air using a flight talisman, his Taoist robe in tatters, his body covered in wounds. Ding Ziohai, you have taken first place in the grand competition. As such, you are promoted to conclave disciple. You may now wear a pale violet robe and have the right to live on the mountain peak. However, mansion grottos are expensive, and you have to buy one with your own money. Looking excited, Ding Ziohai clasped hands and bowed deeply. Many thanks to the sect. Third Elder looked down at Ding Ziohai with a look of approval on his face. Ding Ziohai had long been considered the top figure among offbeat disciples, and had always won acclaim. Third Elder appreciated the fact that this disciple had gone all out for the glory of the sect, but his appreciation was limited to that, and he had no intention of showing him favors. Besides, Ding Ziohai had thanked the sect, not the elder. From the perspective of the sect, a disciple like Ding Ziohai was great, as he had fought hard and killed many enemies to take first place. But from Third Elder's perspective, he believed Ding Ziohai to be stubborn and obstinate. He cared too much about prestige, and had sacrificed possible profit simply to win the competition. People like that usually didn't survive long in the chaotic world they lived in, and it was a waste to bestow favors on someone who wouldn't live long. In troubled times, it was generally better to keep a low profile and not attract attention. People who stuck out usually ended up paying dearly for that. Because of that, Third Elder actually admired a young fellow named Su Qing, who had advanced to a very high level with hardly any fanfare. As Ding Ziohai offered his excited thanks, the surrounding disciples all congratulated him. Congratulations, Elder Brother Ding. Congratulations, Elder Brother Ding. Su Qing stood in the crowd with Huang Yan next to him cheering. A moment later, Huang Yan turned to him and quietly said, Elder Brother Ding is great. All he cares about is killing. He's not like you and me who care about profit. If everyone in Seven Blood Eyes was like Elder Brother Ding, that would be great. Su Qing looked at Ding Ziohai hovering in midair, and he remained calm at heart. Everyone had their own way of living. Some people cared about profit. Some people cared about reputation. Neither were wrong. Although Ding Ziohai was already on the verge of a cultivation-based breakthrough, whereupon he would get an ordinary violet robe, perhaps it had just been his dream to become a conclave disciple. Su Qing didn't feel the need to judge him either way. All he knew was that he didn't care about those things. The only thing about Seven Blood Eyes that he cared about was the potential profit. He needed to reach foundation establishment, both to ensure that he could stay alive and also to get a share of the sect's monthly profits. Besides that, he didn't like sticking out in the crowd, unless it came with astonishing benefits. Otherwise, he preferred to stay hidden in the shadows where it was safe. After bestowing rewards upon Ding Ziohai, Third Elder went back into the violet sea of light. Then the disciples on the altar went their separate ways. Su Qing was exhausted. However, he didn't dare to stay in Seven Blood Eyes for very long. He had profited far too well during the competition. If anyone got any hint of what he had taken, all of Seven Blood Eyes would be shaken to the core. After all, even the great sects on the revered ancient mainland coveted life lamps. Therefore, the first thing he did was go to the shops in the port district and sell all of the random things he'd acquired. He bought some new talisman treasures, then went to a spell formation shop and used the vast amount of merit points he'd earned in the competition to buy 5 sets of defensive spell formations. These spell formations were astonishingly effective. Even one of them would protect a disciple from a foundation establishment cultivator for an extended time period, as long as they weren't in the profound radiant state. And as long as you had enough spirit stones and the proper cultivation base power, you could keep the formation going for a long time. With 5 of them operating simultaneously, they would be even more effective. Buying those 5 formations drained Su Qing's merit points by about 90%, but it was worth it. Next, he went to a medicine shop to buy all sorts of medicinal pills and poisonous plants. At that point, he felt mostly prepared, with the exception of his Dharma boat. I'll go see how long it will take to get my Dharma boat repaired. If it's less than a day, I'll wait, but if it's longer than that, I can't afford to stick around. He wanted to get into foundation establishment as quickly as possible. Considering he had a life lamp, every additional day he waited was another day of anxiety and danger. It was obvious that he couldn't attempt the breakthrough in the sect. He wasn't sure if using the life lamp during the breakthrough would emit fluctuations that others could detect, but he wasn't willing to risk it. Back on Join Island, he had seen what could happen if things went bad during a Foundation establishment breakthrough. Although it was unlikely something like that would happen in Seven Blood Eyes, it wasn't impossible. Su Qing wanted to be prepared for anything. Given he could use the spirit breath lamp, he felt that he could attempt the breakthrough outside of the sect. Therefore, he didn't dally at all on the way to the transportation division to find Xianxia. It was already dark by that point. \\\\. Back at Plank Spring Way, the old innkeeper sat on the floor, tenderly treating some wounds on the anaconda lying in front of him. I can't believe you secretly bought a shapeshifting pill without telling me. You can't just go around consuming those things. You're not ready for shapeshifting yet. Besides, the effects only last for a few days, and if you consume too many, you could cripple your cultivation base. Understand? The old innkeeper obviously cared dearly for the anaconda. After applying the medicine and wiping away the excess, he continued to scold her. You silly little snake. I'm even more stunned that you used the shape-shifting pill to join the 7th Peaks Grand competition. Do you know how dangerous that competition? The anaconda actually seemed very happy as she looked at the innkeeper and said, Coo, coo, coo. I'm not lying. That Sioux scoundrel really was looking at your gall bladder. Wait a second. The innkeeper glared. You didn't go to the grand competition hoping to run into him, did you? Coo, the snake said. The innkeeper looked at the snake and sighed. Then he reached out and stroked her head. Sounding like an old dad talking to his daughter, he said, You silly girl. If he said that snake gall bladders are bitter, doesn't that mean that he's eaten them before? And probably not just one. The snake looked stunned, and then her eyes turned red like she might start crying. In the Seven Blood Eyes capital city, the wind settled over everything like fine sand, and Su Qing walked on a carpet of moonlight as he made his way through the city. His cultivation base was in the great circle of qi condensation, but he had not yet healed from his wounds. Therefore, he remained as much on guard now as he had been when he first arrived at Seven Blood Eyes. Considering he had a life lamp on him now, he was in a state of complete readiness. His right hand swayed at his side in a seemingly natural motion, but the truth was that at the slightest provocation, he could use it to pull out his black iron skewer. He had learned this behavior here in Seven Blood Eyes. The best way to survive was to be a needle concealed in silk. Unless there was an urgent need, it was better to hide your advantages. Another skill he had picked up in Seven Blood Eyes was the ability to be even more relaxed the more his guard went up. Back in the slums in the scavenger base camp, he had been wound up too tight. He had walked around looking like he was ready to fight at a moment's notice. But the truth was that being that anxious all the time made him slower. The ideal method was to remain relaxed but ready to take action. That way, enemies wouldn't realize he was in a state of readiness. Many of his habits and attitudes had changed subconsciously thanks to picking up these new abilities. That said, Su Qing was still young and hadn't reached the same level as the captain, whose mastery over his facial expression had reached the level of perfection. Su Qing wasn't trying to imitate the captain. Everything he did was based on instinct. It was in that manner that he hurried through the city toward Xianxia and the transportation division. However, as he walked along, he stopped upon passing a certain alley. Looking over his shoulder, his eyes turned cold. Slowly emerging around the corner was an emaciated figure, the Mute. Mute's Taoist robe was voluminous, but he was still wearing a dog skin jerkin underneath it, making it look bulky. One difference from his appearance before was that he had a Violent Crimes Division badge on his robe. He was now a formal member of the division. Seeing that Su Qing had noticed him, he squatted down onto his haunches to make it clear he wasn't planning to do anything hostile. Instead, it seemed more like he was following Su Qing, perhaps watching over him protectively. Su Qing eyed the Mute, including his Taoist robe and badge. He had read the Mute's file, and thus knew that he had originally been assigned to the Violent Crimes Division as an intern. Obviously now he was a full-fledged member. I don't like people following me. The Mute looked at him for a moment, then backed away and disappeared into the night. Su Qing looked away. At the moment, he wasn't in the mood to try to figure out if the Mute's intentions were good or malicious, but Su Qing would kill him if he ignored the warning and kept following him. He continued on his way and before long reached the transportation division. Zhang San was there, organizing the items he'd acquired in the grand competition. Zhang San saw him coming and waved. After doing a last bit of organizing, he pulled out his pipe and started smoking. Junior brother Su Qing, we just got back. Shouldn't you be resting? What are you doing here? Su Qing didn't ask Zhang San why he hadn't put his loot into a bag of holding. Instead, he took out his Dharma boat. It thumped down onto the ground with a bang and sent damaged parts scattering every which way. "I need my Dharma boat fixed," Su Qing said calmly. Zhang San's eyes seemed like they might pop out, and he stood there with his pipe just held in his hand, staring at the partially familiar, partially unfamiliar half of a Dharma boat. After a moment passed, he said, "Hold on, we did meet during the grand competition, right? You, I, and the captain went into a temple complex, and we came back together, right?" "That's right," Su Qing said, looking a bit confused. "Okay, so I wasn't hallucinating. It really was you that I ran into during the grand competition. In that case, do you mind telling me how the hell your Dharma boat got into this shape? My God, this was my finest work. I mean, even a freaking Foundation establishment cultivator shouldn't have been able to damage your Dharma boat this badly. How exactly did you manage to destroy half of it? Did you pull it out and use it as a shield?" From the way he spoke, it seemed Zhang San was more upset about the damage to the Dharma boat than Su Qing was. He clearly remembered Su Qing using the Dharma boat in the fight against the giant composite zombie, and at that time, it was in one piece. It seemed inconceivable that it could have been damaged so badly after that, unless Su Qing did something as crazy as the captain had done. Zhang San's heart suddenly skipped a beat when he thought back to their flight from Join Island and how bedraggled and weak Su Qing had seemed. He inhaled sharply. "Did you really do something as crazy as the captain?" Su Qing shook his head no. "How long will it take you to fix it, elder brother Zhang San?" Zhang San walked around the entire Dharma boat to inspect it, then sighed in resignation. "All right, fine. Last time all you brought back was the flying boat, so compared to that, this actually isn't that bad. At least you have half a Dharma boat this time. That said, I can't fix it anytime soon. Tomorrow, the captain and I are going out for a while. He needs me to carry him to some place where he can heal himself. He also said it would be a good place for my Foundation establishment breakthrough. If you're not in a rush, then I'll wait until after I'm in Foundation establishment. That way, I could do an even better job. Plus, the captain got some flesh that would serve as an excellent power source." Su Qing thought about it, then nodded. He didn't ask Zhang San any questions about his plans for Foundation establishment. It didn't matter how close you were to someone, asking questions like that would be suspicious. Clasping hands, he took his leave. This late at night, the 7 Blood Eyes teleportation portals were never activated unless it was an emergency, and Su Qing didn't want to stay at an inn. Instead, he headed to the Violent Crimes Division. Now that he was a deputy captain, he had his own office in the Celestial Bureau. He rarely used it, but considering he had nowhere else to stay, he decided to spend the night there. After all, the Violent Crimes Division was a lot safer compared to the inns. The bureau was empty this late at night, so Su Qing went into his office, activated one of the defensive spell formations he'd bought, and sat down to meditate. The night passed. The following morning when the sun rose, he opened his eyes, quickly put away the spell formation, and left the Violent Crimes Division. He headed straight toward the teleportation portals in the city center. He moved quickly and arrived at his destination in only an hour. There weren't many people in line, but there were 2 individuals who stood out in the crowd. One was Zhang San and the other was on his back, the captain. Given their conversation yesterday, Su Qing wasn't surprised. The captain noticed Su Qing right away. Taking a bite of an apple, he waved. As Su Qing approached, Zhang San said hello, and the captain smiled at him enigmatically. "You don't want to break through in the sect, so you're going out. Am I right? Want some suggestions on where to go?" Zhang San's eyes gleamed when he heard the captain's question, as if he was pleased to see his investment paying off. Glancing at the line leading to the teleportation portal, Su Qing calmly said, "No, I just have some business outside the sect." "Deputy Captain Su, your expression is way too fake. Okay, let me give you a quick lesson. When you lie, you need to look the other party in the eye. That way you come across as being sincere. Considering how evasive you're being, I can only come to the conclusion that you must have encountered something amazing on the island. Come, bring it out and let me see. I want to know if it's worth as much as this apple." Finishing his current apple, he produced the large apple Su Qing had given him on Join Island and took a bite. Looking back from the teleportation portal, Su Qing nodded. "Sure, so where are you going, Captain?" "Me? I'm going to heal up and come back even stronger than before. When I'm back, you little punk, you'd better pay me the 10,000 spirit stones you owe. If not, I'll crush you mercilessly." Eyes narrowing, the captain slowly looked down at Su Qing's bag, then looked back up and took a huge bite of his apple. "I hope you recover quickly, Captain," Su Qing said, looking the captain directly in the eyes. The captain's eyes went wide as he returned Su Qing's gaze and recalled what he had just said moments ago about sincerity. Xianxia sighed. He was starting to wonder if the freaks that were the captain and Su Qing would always start chatting like this when they ran into each other. He was about to interrupt when, all of a sudden, the sky above Seven Blood Eyes started turning dark. And then, a mighty pressure descended that caused the entire capital city to tremble, and even the Seven Peaks. Everyone in the city, from cultivators to mortals, was shaken to the core and looked up at the dome of heaven. Huge waves surged through the entire port area, almost like it was high tide. As for Su Qing, his expression flickered as he looked at the source of the darkness. It was a majestic and seemingly never-ending layer of black clouds coming from the direction of Forbidden by the Phoenix. As it passed over Seven Blood Eyes, it blocked out the sun and turned everything below it dark. The black clouds were filled with endless lightning that crashed down to the lands below it, and the clouds emanated a threatening air that affected all living beings. Anyone who saw it would feel an instinctual sense of deadly crisis rising up within them. Within those black clouds, it was just barely possible to see something like a god that resembled both a phoenix and a hawk. It was brown like a rock, with feathers that burned like fire. It seemed to be moving with rage and anger toward the forbidden sea, and as it moved out over the water, it whipped the waves into a. Based on the sensation alone, this level of might vastly surpassed that of Join. As Su Qing stared at the clouds, a splitting pain filled his head. It was the same with everyone else, and many people even bled from their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. To Su Qing's shock, he knew who this being was. He had encountered these black clouds on his first trip out to sea. This was none other than the emperor of the #1 forbidden region on South Phoenix. It was Flame Phoenix. Back on that occasion, Flame Phoenix had seemed calm, and thus, Su Qing had not experienced any pain. But now Flame Phoenix was obviously furious, and those emotions affected everything around it. If Flame Phoenix is going out to sea, something big must be going on, the captain said quietly. I wonder if the Emperor Forbidden by the zombie has left the forbidden ground. The black clouds passed over Seven Blood Eyes and then disappeared into the distance. The sun once again shone down on the city, but everyone remained shaken. After returning from sea, Su Qing had asked Zhang San about Flame Phoenix and had a general idea of the phoenix's identity and terrifying nature. He also knew that though it was generally asleep, it did wake up occasionally. It treated humans and non-humans equally and acted as something of a protector to the living beings on the continent of South Phoenix. In fact, that was one reason why humans continued to live on South Phoenix. With Flame Phoenix gone, things in Seven Blood Eyes gradually started returning to normal. As for Su Qing, he looked away from the disappearing clouds, walked up to the teleportation portal and vanished. The little punk doesn't trust me, the captain said. He must have got something really good, but I doubt it could be as impressive as some of Join's flesh. Grinning, he slapped Zhang San on the top of the head. Let's go, Zhang San. Big bro's going to treat you to some delicious meat. Zhang San sighed and thought, Su Qing doesn't trust you. Well, neither do I. But considering how much I've invested in you, I don't really have any choice, do I? All I can do is follow orders. Investments of mine aren't big bros. They're big grandpas. Shaking his head, Zhang San carried the captain into the teleportation portal. After Su Qing, Zhang San, and the captain left, Seven Blood Eyes gradually returned to normal. However, the sky seemed a bit overcast. A big storm was coming. Su Qing knew he had to be very careful about picking a location for his foundation establishment breakthrough. There were many aspects to consider. For example, he needed to make sure no one was following him. At the same time, he needed to determine if there were any powerful organizations nearby. The local spirit power levels were important. He wanted a place where it wasn't too strong but wasn't too weak. He didn't want to be too close to a forbidden region, but at the same time didn't want to be near a city. All things considered, the wilderness seemed like the best option. It didn't seem like there were going to be a lot of places to pick from. After he narrowed down the places that were suitable, he needed to determine if anyone else had used those places in the past for breakthroughs. He had considered the temple complex in the forbidden region by the scavenger base camp, but the surroundings were too dangerous. Besides, the singing made him hesitant, so in the end he chose not to go there. The first place he visited was a Seven Blood Eyes city near Violet Land's territory. It was in the heartland of human-occupied South Phoenix, where there weren't many forbidden regions, and things were relatively safe. That said, there were a wide variety of people here. As the light of teleportation faded, Su Qing walked off the spell formation. He didn't immediately leave the city. Instead, he found an inn where he could keep an eye on his surroundings and rest. The next morning, he used a talisman treasure to change his appearance, then teleported out of the city. That was how he spent the next 2 weeks. He teleported to 7 or 8 different locations, changing his appearance each time. Not only did it give him a chance to see what the rest of South Phoenix was like, but also it allowed him to confirm that nobody was following him. At that point, he breathed a sigh of relief. During those 2 weeks, his wounds recovered by about 70 or 80%, placing his battle prowess at roughly the same place it had been when he went to the Merfolk Isles. After his last teleportation, he left the city and began searching the wilderness for a suitable spot for his foundation establishment breakthrough. That search took another half-month. The place he finally selected was a mountainous region in the southeast of the continent. There were many mountains here, and most of them were covered with jungle. It wasn't a forbidden region. Rather, it was more like a rainforest, with high humidity and silty soil. Because of the terrain, there weren't many cities nearby. In fact, the nearest one was about a week away. The mutagen wasn't very strong, but neither was the spirit power. Because of that, there were no major organizations nearby. Although there were some aspects to this area that weren't perfect, after having inspected so many other areas, Su Qing decided that it would work for. The specific location he picked wasn't on top of one of the mountains, but rather in a deep jungle valley between two mountains. Given his experience dealing with jungles, it wasn't hard for him to find a space to excavate a cave. The soil was loose, making it difficult to dig in. However, Su Qing was able to use the sea-forming scripture to extract most of the moisture from one section. Then, deep beneath the surface, he created something like a cave temple. He concealed the entrance and also scattered poison powder all over the area. Then, he sat down cross-legged in the cave, took a moment to settle in, then set up and activated all 5 of his defensive spell formations. He had an additional formation that would conceal his aura and fluctuations. Putting some spirit stones into the formation to activate it, he settled into place and started breathing deeply. At long last, he was feeling safe. This is where I'll reach foundation establishment. Looking down into his bag of holding, he checked the various food items he had purchased on his journey through the various cities recently. There was enough food to last for at least half a year. He wasn't sure how long he would need for the breakthrough, but he had already decided that once he started the process, he wouldn't go outside until it was finished. He was now totally ready for the breakthrough. However, before beginning any actual cultivation, there were 2 things he needed to take care of. Taking out his black iron skewer, he performed an incantation gesture with his left hand, and then sent spirit power into it to suppress Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. The Patriarch instantly wailed in agony. "What's going on, my lord? I'm sorry I was wrong. Don't kill me. Just tell me what I did wrong." Su Qing ignored him and continued with the suppression. Eventually, the Patriarch became so weak that he passed out. At that point, Su Qing stopped. He had been worried that the Patriarch might interfere with him in the middle of the breakthrough process, but now the Patriarch was weak enough that it wouldn't be an issue. Next, with numerous incantation gestures and portions of spirit power, he put a host of seals on the iron skewer. His shadow was able to sense everything he had just done, and now it was trembling with the knowledge of what was to come. Face expressionless, Su Qing looked at his shadow. The shadow trembled even more. Then, as Su Qing stared at it, it started splitting apart, as if it were damaging itself intentionally. "Not enough," Su Qing said tranquilly. Using the power of the violet crystal, he viciously suppressed the shadow until it became so faint it looked like it was about to collapse. Only then did he stop and say, "If I fail to reach foundation establishment, then right before I die, I'll suppress you out of existence." With his shadow taken care of, Su Qing had weakened 2 of his greatest potential calamities. Only then did he feel like he could rest at ease. Taking out the spirit breath lamp, he lit it. Instantly, the light of the lamp spread out to encompass him. Normally speaking, using protective magical devices like this was very expensive. Because of that, cultivators generally would only light them right on the verge of reaching foundation establishment. It was the same even in the fabulously wealthy 7 Blood Eyes. Most disciples who were approaching a breakthrough would rent a spot in the sect, not go outside like Su Qing. Doing that was considered a luxury. That said, Su Qing wasn't ready for his breakthrough quite yet. His first goal was to expand his spirit sea as much as possible. What was more, he wasn't going to power the lamp with his own resources, but rather draw on the lamp's inherent spirit power. He could sense that the lamp had an abundance of spirit power, and he felt no qualms about burning it. Next, he produced 2 jade boxes. One of them contained 3 foundation establishment pills. The other contained 2. The first he'd acquired from the captain, and the second was from the corpse of the unlucky merman whose breakthrough Su Qing had interrupted at Foundation Establishment Tower in the Merfolk Isles. That merman had obviously been an important person and had originally possessed more than these pills, but he had consumed several of them, leaving only 2 remaining at the time of his death. Su Qing was pleased to have a total of 5 pills. Taking a deep breath within the light of the spirit breath lamp, he closed his eyes and began cultivating. 7 days passed. During that time, Su Qing completely immersed himself in cultivation. He constantly used the sea-forming scripture, bringing in spirit power from the surroundings and sending it coursing through his body and into his spirit sea. As the process continued, his spirit sea grew larger. It went from the previous limit of 891 meters to 1,020. That alone smashed all historical records in the 7th peak. After all, when Master 7th broke through, he only reached 810 meters. Before Master 7th, no one had reached that level. Now, a full 60-year cycle later, in a little cave no one knew about, Su Qing pushed the sea-forming scripture to new heights. His 1,020-meter spirit sea was shockingly majestic, and if he revealed it openly, it would shake the jungle around him. If people in 7 blood eyes found out about it, they would be shaken, from the top leaders to the lowliest disciples. Unfortunately, that would attract far too much attention in the sect. And in a place where the only unifying force was profit, being so dazzling wouldn't necessarily lead to a good outcome. Su Qing had no intention of letting anyone know the truth. Prestige didn't matter to him. He just wanted to stay alive and maybe increase his quality of life. In the brutal world he lived in, the only way to do that was to get stronger. If an enemy threatened your safety, you needed to be able to kill them. That was the only way to stay truly safe. Of course, if there was some purpose to revealing his spirit sea, he would consider it. But until he was sure that he was superior to everyone around him, he would keep it hidden and use it only to strike a killing blow unexpectedly. That was his way of staying alive. Taking a deep breath, he calmly continued with his cultivation. More days passed. He had not reached the final limits for his spirit sea, and thus, every day it would grow by another 30 meters. 1,050. 1,110. By the time another 7 days passed, his spirit sea reached the shocking level of 1,200. His spirit sea was now quadruple the size of an ordinary disciple in the Great Circle. Thanks to the light of the spirit breath lamp, Su Qing seemed sparkling and translucent, as though endless seawater was flowing through him. In fact, the entire cave was filled with thick water vapor. Opening his eyes, he took a short break to eat, checked the spell formations and poison powder, and then prepared to continue. I can still push it farther. 1,230 meters, 1,260 meters, 1,290 meters. At the end of the 3rd week, his spirit sea reached 1,410 meters, and at long last he was starting to feel pain. It was like he was a bag of water. As that bag filled with water, it would eventually reach its limit and burst if too much was added. Breathing unsteadily, Su Qing mulled the matter over and then gritted his teeth and continued with his cultivation. This time he went slower. Instead of adding 30 meters per day, he instead added 15. As he made further progress, the pain increased. Half a month later, his spirit sea reached the astounding size of 1,500 meters. Pain assailed him throughout his body, to the point where he seemed like he might burst. Meanwhile, the violet crystal worked madly to help him recover. "That's my limit," he murmured. He had pushed himself so far that he felt like it would be difficult to move. It was like entire mountains and seas were resting on his shoulders, pushing down on him with incredible force. Thankfully, he had the violet crystal, otherwise he wouldn't be able to continue with cultivation. Now it's time for foundation establishment. Eyes shining with determination, he took out the first foundation establishment pill and put it in his mouth. It was like throwing water into boiling oil. His 1,500-meter spirit sea exploded, its surface instantly turning into raging waves as it spread out with mountain-toppling, sea-draining force. The breakthrough from chi condensation into foundation establishment involved 3 steps. The first step was sending accumulated spirit power exploding into one's body to search for dharma apertures and memorize their location. The most important aspect during this time was the total number of dharma apertures found. The step could be repeated as many times as necessary, and foundation establishment pills helped during it. Usually, This part took up about half of the total breakthrough time. The second step was to converge one spirit C, use it to batter the first Dharma aperture and ultimately open it. After enough spirit power was poured into the open Dharma aperture, then the cultivator's first batch of Dharma force would result. When the Dharma force was unleashed, it would fill the cultivator, transforming their flesh and blood and increasing their life level. That was the third step in the process. When all three steps were complete, the cultivator was officially in foundation establishment. It sounded simple, but the reality was that the only way to successfully complete all three steps was to be 100% prepared and also have a bit of luck. Su Qing started with the first step by unleashing the full power of his 1,500-meter spirit sea. As the waves of power surged, he began the search for his Dharma apertures. Dharma apertures were not acupoints. Because no two physical bodies were exactly the same, the Dharma apertures were never in the same location. Su Qing had a huge reserve of spirit power, so he could spend more time looking. What was more, there were various ways to attempt to sense the location of the Dharma apertures. Among the Jade slips Ding Zhu had given him was a suggestion to use a method called forceful exploration. The reason it was called forceful exploration was that it involved using one's spirit power to force the Dharma aperture to reveal themselves. Many Qi condensation disciples considered it a trump card to use at the very end of the step. But Su Qing could use only a small portion of his spirit power to utilize the method much earlier. He didn't expect one usage of forceful exploration to reveal all of the Dharma apertures, so he planned to do some experiments first. He started by releasing only 20% of the power of his spirit sea, in other words, 300 meters of it. Although it was only 20% to him, it would be going all out for most ordinary disciples. He trembled from head to toe as 300 meters of spirit sea erupted from his Danshan region, sweeping through his meridians, flesh, and bones like the tide. As it spread, his meridians became like rivers, and the spirit sea raged like sea dragons through them. As for his flesh, bones, and organs, they were like parched fields that sucked up the spirit power greedily. As all of that happened, he began his search. Almost immediately, he noticed places in his meridians that were like small vortexes. They were very small and difficult to spot, and would only be noticeable when the meridians were absolutely full to capacity. The vortexes were like heavenly gates that, when filled with spirit power, released a very mysterious aura. Upon sensing that aura, Su Qing came to realize that the vortexes were indeed the Dharma apertures. The apertures weren't just located in his meridians, they were also in his flesh, organs, and bones. 91 of them. His eyes shone as he ended his first attempt to sense the Dharma apertures. According to the information he'd read about foundation establishment, mutagen would interfere with the attempt to sense the apertures. However, theoretically speaking, there should be 120 of them in total. Normally, finding only 80 would be considered a success, while someone who found 90 would stand head and shoulders above ordinary cultivators. Because 30 Dharma apertures was the requirement to form a single life flame, that meant that only 3 life flames were possible after the first. If Su Qing didn't care about the total number of apertures, then he could easily proceed to the second step of foundation establishment. Wait, I don't have any mutagen in me, so why did I only sense 91 Dharma apertures? After some thought, he came to the conclusion that it must come down to aptitude. Before the broken face of the god came, there was no mutagen in the world. Back then, cultivators didn't have to worry about the purity levels within their bodies. Everything came down to aptitude. But things were different now. Most sects and organizations didn't care much about aptitude. The only people who did were the important scions of massive organizations. In other words, my lack of mutagen doesn't change the fact that if my Dharma apertures are deeply hidden, my ability to sense them will come down to aptitude. After thinking about it some more, his eyes shone. He wasn't worried that he hadn't found all the apertures, and if his aptitude was limited, that didn't matter either. As long as he had enough spirit power, then there were ways for him to find the hidden Dharma apertures. If he didn't find them in one shot, then he would try a second time. And if that didn't work, he would try 5 or 6 times. Having reached the conclusion that this was definitely the best idea, he closed his eyes and released half of his remaining 1,200 meters of spirit sea. 600 meters of spirit sea exploded out as he began his second attempt to sense the Dharma apertures. What he was doing was absolutely incomparable and would be considered astonishing to ordinary cultivators. As his spirit sea erupted, His meridians swelled, and his flesh, organs, and bones filled with spirit power, causing him to tremble inside and out. The force of his effort was so intense that, in the blink of an eye, 5 Dharma apertures appeared. He had already sensed a total of 96 Dharma apertures. There was still spirit power left for his second attempt, however, so he continued the search. I have enough spirit power and enough foundation establishment pills. Before his second attempt was even over, he decided to unleash his remaining 600 meters of spirit C. However, that was when something unexpected happened. As he sat there cross-legged in his cave temple, the spirit breath lamp, which was casting its light over him and separating him from the darkness, suddenly seemed to sway as if it had been hit by some wind. In fact, as the flame flickered, it looked like it might be extinguished. As the flame swayed, shadows appeared on the walls of the cave, like people or creatures. However, they were incomplete and so blurry that it was impossible to make them out clearly. It was like they existed in the cracks between time and space, and thus weren't completely visible. Normally speaking, they didn't pay attention to what was happening around them, but the aura created by Su Qing sensing his Dharma aperture seeped into their world, attracting their attention. Their world was a huge place, and auras like this would often appear there. Because of the great distances involved, only Grus who were in the immediate vicinity would usually notice. But the flame of the spirit breath lamp could exert pressure on them, and thus, all they could do was congregate in the cave and look on greedily. As that greed transformed into malicious intentions, Su Qing sensed it, and his mind. He didn't know exactly what these Grus were. His Jade slips with information about Foundation establishment hadn't offered a clear explanation, but he could sense their maliciousness, and knew that if they attacked him, his breakthrough would fail. Thankfully, the spirit breath lamp couldn't be extinguished so easily. Though its flame flickered, it still cast its protective light around Su Qing. Knowing he didn't have a lot of time to work with, he took a deep breath and used his spirit C to continue looking for Dharma apertures. Rumbling filled him as he found an additional 7. He was now at a total of 103. He only needed 17 more to reach the theoretical limit of 120. Again, he murmured through gritted teeth. Sending his spirit C sweeping through himself, he heard cracking sounds as he found 4 more Dharma apertures. 107. At the same time, the bizarre shadows around him grew clearer. Howling noiselessly, they circled, exhaling sinister winds to try to extinguish the lamp. The spirit breath lamp's flame flickered even more wildly, as if it might be extinguished at any moment. Su Qing ignored all of that. Opening his eyes, he consumed another Foundation establishment pill, instantly causing his dried-up spirit C to fill with spirit power. Without hesitation, he sent the power through his body, making him feel like he was swelling up dramatically. As his third attempt began, and the spirit power flowed through him, he found 3 more as yet undiscovered Dharma apertures. He was now at a total of 110. Gasping for breath, he waved his hand, causing 1 entire box of Foundation establishment pills to fly over. Inside were 3 pills that he consumed all at once. Rumbling filled him as the power of the pills became like raging sea dragons within him. He wondered if his body could even sustain the force, as it felt like he was swelling up even more than before. However, 1 Dharma aperture after another appeared. 113, 115. All the way to 118. He just needed 2 more Dharma apertures to reach the limit. However, no matter how he searched, he found that the aura emitted by the Dharma apertures he'd found so far was too intense. That itself was what had attracted the Grus. Most cultivators would sense 90 apertures, or perhaps a few more. Su Qing really was very close to the limit. The intense aura that resulted was like a bright torch on a dark night. As for the spirit breath lamp, it wasn't the highest quality treasure possible, and it could only hold on for so long. After all, it had never been tasked with protecting a cultivator like Su Qing. As the flickering of the flame grew even more intense, a final blast of sinister wind suddenly extinguished it. In the instant the lamp went out, all of the light vanished, and the countless Grus erupted into cackling laughter. Filled with unprecedented greed and longing, they lunged toward Su Qing. However, also in that instant, a light flared that surpassed the spirit breath lamp by many times over. In fact, it wasn't even possible to compare them. One was like a firefly, the other was like the brightly shining moon. The light swept out to fill the entire cave with brightness like that of daytime. The Grus let loose blood-curdling screams, as they were instantly transformed into ash. In front of Su Qing appeared a burning lamp that looked like a black umbrella. Of course, it was none other than the precious treasure he had taken from the merfolk, the life lamp. The lamp had not been lit. The brilliant light that shone out from it came from the lamp itself. It looked like it was burning, yet actually was. Even unlit, it was shocking to the extreme, and its light covered Su Qing with such intensity that the grooves in the area were like moths that flew into a flame. Though some survived at the outskirts, none of them dared to get close after that. The brilliant light also gave Su Qing some clues about the Dharma apertures. As spirit power rushed through him, his mind spun and his body shook violently. At the same time, he found the final 2 Dharma apertures. 120 apertures. Throughout the entire history of 7 Blood Eyes, no one had ever sensed 120 Dharma apertures, and it was only possible to sense the apertures during the breakthrough process. Therefore, it was generally accepted that, however many you sensed in that moment, that was your limit going forward. It wasn't just rare for someone to sense 120 Dharma apertures in 7 Blood Eyes. It was also the case in most great sects and organizations. However, in the information in Su Qing's Jade slips, 120 was actually called the theoretical limit for Dharma apertures. Though there was no information indicating there was anything past that, after sensing the 120th Dharma aperture, Su Qing realized that 120 actually wasn't the limit. Unfortunately, it wasn't possible to detect beyond 120 at the moment. He would have to open all the apertures before he could explore what was. What was more, he got the feeling that if he broke past that point of 120, then finding more Dharma apertures would result in heaven-shaking, earth-toppling transformations. He took a deep breath, his heart filled with anticipation. However, he also knew that now wasn't the time to contemplate those matters. He could worry about them later. In that case, I'll start the second step. It's time to open my first Dharma aperture of Foundation Establishment. He reached out, took his final Foundation Establishment pill, and consumed it. His spirit sea exploded like the raging tide, rushing directly toward his first Dharma aperture. Su Qing felt like he was being pummeled, like an enormous beast was smashing into him at high speed. It almost seemed like his body might collapse. However, it was also to his surprise that his first Dharma aperture immediately opened. The open Dharma aperture became like a point of light, a burning flame that started sucking in spirit power until it became a vortex. Rumbling sounds echoed out as dramatic transformations occurred to his energy. Burning like fire, it expanded rapidly. At the same time, a brightly burning thread of highly compressed fire appeared within the vortex. That thread was the Dharma force of Foundation Establishment. It surpassed the great circle of chi condensation by a huge amount, to the point where they were on completely different levels. As it rose up, glittering with dazzling light, it emitted shocking heat that seemed reflected in Su Qing himself. The spirit sea in his Dharma aperture vastly surpassed anything from an ordinary cultivator. Clearly, his work to push his spirit sea to 1,500 meters had been worth it. And given that his Dharma aperture could fit a 1,500-meter spirit sea, it was little wonder that his Dharma aperture surpassed anything that an ordinary cultivator could form. As Su Qing's aura transformed, the Dharma force coursed through him, provoking extremely dramatic transformations. It started with his meridians, which became tougher. Furthermore, it was possible to see countless natural striations within him. Next was his flesh. As the Dharma force flowed through it, it transformed on a substructural level. Then came his bones and organs, all of which became tougher. And all of them, along with his flesh, came to bear natural striations. This was a Dharma body. When cultivators stepped into Foundation Establishment, their life force leaped to a higher level. They turned what was mortal into something dharmic. As his Dharma body formed and his Dharma force proliferated, he began to emit fluctuations that surpassed chi condensation. As they rolled out explosively, he opened his eyes, which shone with violet light. According to what he'd read in the Jade slips, when a disciple who had a forbidden sea dragon whale reached Foundation Establishment, they would be able to open their second Dharma aperture more quickly than average. During the actual process of the breakthrough, opening a second Dharma aperture would result in a second opportunity to refine the body, and it could only happen then. After the breakthrough point, opening more Dharma apertures wouldn't result in any changes. It was a precious opportunity, and in some ways, that second Dharma aperture became like a second life. Su Qing threw both of his hands out, and his dragon whale appeared, which had reformed after his previous grievous injuries. Forcing it down into the size of his fist, he put it in his mouth and swallowed it. A moment later, the snake-necked dragon emitted a cheerful cry as it rushed toward his second Dharma aperture. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the second Dharma aperture opened. The snake-necked dragon charged inside, transforming into a 1,500-meter spirit sea vortex. Flames raged, and a second thread of Dharma force appeared. When it appeared, it swept through him, and once again transformed and blessed his body. The shadowy grooves surrounding him looked more greedy than ever, but when they tried to approach, the life lamp kept them at bay. But then an unprecedented sinister wind erupted like a tempest. It was as if some mighty fiend had risen up from within the grooves and was trying to extinguish the lamp. Although the grooves could not blow out the fire, they did manage to weaken it. And as it weakened, that unseen fiend seemed to get very excited and howled noiselessly. Then it unleashed a projection that, in the blink of an eye, shot towards Su Qing's forehead. However, as the life lamp glittered brightly, the projection was forced to abandon its assault and shrank back. Then Su Qing's shadow, which he had suppressed earlier, seemed to catch a whiff of an appetizing aroma and shot toward the projection. Before the projection could return to where it came from, the shadow arrived and gobbled it up. As the fiend's howls faded, the shadow burped and then looked back maliciously at Su Qing. In the end, though, it shivered a few times and seemed to reconsider taking action. It remembered being viciously suppressed, and as a result, didn't dare to make a move. Returning to Su Qing, it once again assumed its bored and bedraggled countenance from before. Meanwhile, the grooves in the area all trembled like fish in the face of a shark. Then, all in the same moment, they vanished. Su Qing opened his eyes and looked down at his shadow. The shadow shivered and more cracks appeared on it. Whether it was real or an act, Su Qing didn't know. Narrowing his eyes, he examined himself. His Dharma body was still being blessed, and rumbling sounds filled him from the beating of his heart. It sounded like war drums. At the same time, the second thread of Dharma force combined with the first. That new unified thread of Dharma force made Su Qing burn even brighter as the two spirit seas in his two Dharma apertures continued to produce more Dharma force. After filling him completely, it seeped out into the open. His aura was now far beyond what it had been in the past. In fact, it surpassed comparison. And in terms of level, if he encountered another Foundation establishment cultivator right now, then that person's Dharma apertures wouldn't be nearly as dazzling as Su Qing's. The point of opening Dharma apertures is for life flames. 30 Dharma apertures allow you to form your first life flame. 1 life flame is the true early Foundation establishment. 2 life flames is mid-Foundation establishment. Only by forming life flames can one truly unleash the signature power of Foundation establishment cultivators, the profound radiant state. As Su Qing knew from his Jade slips, Foundation establishment cultivators didn't keep their life flames ignited for long periods of time. After all, being in the profound radiant state was extremely draining. That said, the profound radiant state provided incredible amounts of battle prowess. That was why most Foundation establishment cultivators with life flames only used them in battle. That was why I was able to beat Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. He hadn't opened his 30th Dharma aperture. I need to get to that point as quickly as possible. Su Qing's eyes shone with both vigilance and anticipation. The vigilance was from the fact that he now knew Foundation establishment cultivators were more complicated than he had realized. The anticipation was from knowing that after opening enough Dharma apertures, he could enter the profound radiant state. And then there was his life lamp. Even the great sects and organizations long for life lamps. One such lamp contains the power of an entire additional life flame. That said, in order to use the lamp I have, I first need a life flame. Only then can I ignite it within me. In other words, once I form my first life flame, I can then put it onto the life lamp. With that foundation for my life flame, I'll actually have the power of 2 life flames, allowing me to crush anyone in early Foundation establishment. And I bet that, given the profundity of my Dharma apertures, I'll be able to stay in the profound radiant state for much longer than average. Eyes flashing like lightning, he picked up the life lamp. As its light reflected in his eyes, they seemed to burn even more brightly. Next, I need to put the life lamp inside of me. That'll be the safest thing. The Dharma force within him erupted out of his 2 Dharma apertures. Placing his hands over the life lamp caused it to become slightly transparent. Then he used the Dharma force to merge it into himself. As his Dharma force came back inside his body, he sensed the life lamp in his Danshan region, like a black umbrella. It abounded with profound mystery, and as it slowly opened and closed, it pulsed with a baleful aura. After the life lamp pulsed brightly, then darkened back and forth a few times, it settled down. It had become part of Su Qing's body, and as it did, a feeling of ancient times settled into him. Just barely visible above Su Qing's head was the image of a black umbrella, like an imperial canopy, tapping into the fires of heaven to emanate a screen of protection around him. Beneath that umbrella, Su Qing felt incomparably safe. At the same time, his Dharma apertures experienced a blessing. The spirit seas within them rotated faster, and the speed of production for his Dharma force increased. It was now possible to sense some of the aura of that black umbrella within his Dharma force. It seemed wild and ancient and burning hot. As it spread through Su Qing, he felt like he was being scalded. In fact, at that moment, his clothes crumbled into ashes. The cave temple filled with intense heat, causing the walls to crack. And then the rainforest outside started steaming. Trees burst into flames, then crumbled into ashes. Before long, the intense heat spread out to the entire rainforest. As steam rolled up, the ground became parched. And soon, all the trees had been burned into ashes for a range of over 9,000 meters. Within that area, the shocking heat made the land look like it had been scorched by drought for 1,000 years. In the middle of that drought-scourged area, the soil around Su Qing's cave had already been baked into black crystal, and he sat in the middle of it all, eyes closed peacefully as he meditated. If someone else in Foundation establishment was able to look inside of him in that moment, they would be flabbergasted to realize that their Dharma apertures were small while his were enormous. Furthermore, he had a black umbrella inside of him protecting his soul. The glow of the black umbrella completely encompassed him, and within that glow, it almost seemed possible that there existed heavenly palaces. After a long time passed, Su Qing opened his eyes. And his eyes opened, the 9,000-meter area of flame grew more blistering, sending steam rolling up into the sky to form the indistinct image of a black umbrella, which in turn masked the fluctuations. As a result, no one saw what was happening. However, all of the wild beasts in the area trembled and prostrated on the ground, not daring to move. One reason was that Su Qing's aura was already that of Foundation establishment, the might of which would weigh down in stupefying fashion. The other reason was because of the life lamp in him. It was impossible to know what that umbrella-shaped life lamp had gone through during its existence, but it had an intense, murderous aura. According to the information from the captain, this lamp had to come from the time before the broken face of the god arrived, and was linked to the bloodline of one of the ancient emperors or imperial sovereigns, and it must have been created using an imperial-class technique. Even in that past era, people like that were as rare as phoenix feathers or killing horns. Any such individual could dominate everything around them, and the only cultivators who could fight them were also from a bloodline of one of the ancient emperors or imperial sovereigns, and also possessed life lamps. After the broken face of the god arrived, the ancient emperors and imperial sovereigns left. Because of that, life lamps were exceedingly rare in the world. Only the trusted scions of powerful sects and organizations would be lucky enough to get them. I wonder which of the ancient emperors and imperial sovereigns this lamp comes from. Su Qing took out an ordinary set of clothing and put it on. He looked at the black umbrella above, formed from steam and mist, then opened his mouth and inhaled. Instantly, all of the mist from the 9,000-meter area of flame rushed toward him. Su Qing became the center of a vortex as the intensely hot mist rushed into his nose and mouth. As the mist vanished, his eyes shone brightly, glittering as if they had stars in them, their light thrumming with the Dharma force of Foundation establishment, which could shake one down to the soul. Apparently, he was so full of Dharma force that he was instinctively releasing it. Su Qing's expression was the same as ever as this happened. He knew that, because he had just stepped into Foundation establishment, he simply wasn't accustomed to the terrifying nature of Dharma force. Ordinary Foundation establishment cultivators form one life flame per 30 Dharma apertures. As a result, they usually form 3 before stepping into a new cultivation realm. But my current Dharma apertures already have the potential to eventually form a total of 4 life flames. Looking down at the umbrella-shaped life lamp within him, his eyes shone with keen anticipation. According to the captain's speculations, even back in the era before the broken face of the god came, the scions of the ancient emperors and imperial sovereigns generally only formed one life lamp. Back then, only those truly chosen by heaven and thought to have the potential to become ancient emperors or imperial sovereigns would form multiple life lamps. And for them, the number of life lamps they could form was equal to the number of life flames they had. I'm happy to just have one. Now I really need to open 30 Dharma apertures. Su Qing took a moment to inspect himself thoroughly. Because of the black umbrella covering him, his cultivation base fluctuations weren't very obvious. Looking down at his shadow, he sent his thoughts out to control it. In response, the shadow sent a sliver of itself inside Su Qing to cover over the life lamp. As the shadow neared the lamp, it shivered as though it was being shoved away. However, Su Qing calmly forced the shadow to continue, and it didn't dare to resist. Under Su Qing's control, the shadow formed a cover that went completely over the lamp. Su Qing's entire person seemed to go dark at that moment. He still pulsed with foundation establishment fluctuations, but the life lamp wasn't visible. It's too bad my sea and mountain incantation is at such a low level, or maybe it's because the technique really has reached its final limit. Either way, it doesn't seem like I can push it any higher than it is. The sea and mountain incantation had been immensely helpful to him, and he had pushed it far past its original limit. Now, it seemed impossible to improve it any further, but Su Qing couldn't help feeling that he was missing something. I need to try to figure out a way to push the sea and mountain incantation to a higher level. And now that my cultivation base is stabilizing, I need to hurry back to 7 Blood Eyes, register my cultivation base on the 7th peak, and get a new foundation establishment technique. Because he didn't have a foundation establishment technique, he couldn't open any new Dharma apertures. Therefore, he took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and focused on recovery cultivation. A month passed slowly but surely. He had now been away from the sect for about 3 months. With his fluctuations held back and his shadow covering the life lamp, he seemed like an ordinary foundation establishment cultivator in all respects. During the month that had just passed, he significantly improved his understanding and control of the life lamp. When he opened his eyes, something like lightning flickered in their depths. Calmly performing an incantation gesture, he pointed his finger toward the dome of heaven. Igniting his 2 Dharma apertures, he sent their shocking power through his finger and shooting high up into the. Up above, a semi-transparent entity became visible, spiraling in the air as it turned into a snake-necked dragon. Throwing its head back, it roared to heaven as its semi-transparent form grew more and more visible. A wild aura built up within it, stronger and stronger. Eventually, it looked like a real living creature with absolutely no differences from a real snake-necked dragon. What was more, it pulsed with the fluctuations of foundation establishment. It seemed savage and wild, pitch black in color, with a long neck and a crest of vicious spikes, and its burning eyes seemed completely lifelike. In fact, if you put it in the Forbidden Sea, then unless it actually started fighting, it would be difficult for anyone to tell that it was the result of a magical technique. Its back was almost like a turtle's shell, providing powerful defenses. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth that made it look even more ferocious, and its 4 draconic flippers were so impressive they would obviously make it capable of attaining incredible speed in the water. As the 900-meter snake-necked dragon hovered in the air, Su Qing stood and walked toward it. Now, he didn't need a flight talisman to walk through the air. Step by step he ascended, walking toward the dragon. At first, the sensation was unsettling, but after 7 or 8 steps he acclimated and walked up into the air toward the snake-necked dragon. The dragon lowered its head and he stepped onto it. When he turned around to face forward, the dragon howled, flapped its 4 flippers, and shot up into the sky. The speed it could attain was shocking. Mortals wouldn't be able to see the snake-necked dragon, and even chi condensation cultivators would see little more than a vague blur unless they focused their spirit power on their eyes. Otherwise, they would only see Su Qing standing in midair, his hands clasped behind his back as he moved forward. This was foundation establishment. It was just like how, back when Su Qing had fled from Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior through the slums into the depths of the Forbidden Region, the Patriarch had moved along while perched on his Golden Vajra Warrior projection. That said, the Patriarch's Golden Vajra couldn't compare to Su Qing's snake-necked dragon, whether it was in terms of its level of corporeality or its aura. The two were in the same cultivation realm, but they were still poles apart. Su Qing looked calmly down from the snake-necked dragon's head as he sent it toward the nearest city with a teleportation portal. As he flew along through the wilderness, he noticed how the rugged environment was filled with countless bones. Mortals in this world lived very difficult lives. Although it seemed like cultivators had better opportunities than mortals, the truth was that because of the dangers of mutagen and how expensive cultivation resources were, most cultivators had no hope of advancing far. The only way to get stronger was to fight, and fighting could always lead to dying. In reality, cultivators had very few options to pick from. It was for that reason that people like Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior, who had experienced some level of glory, eventually decided that, after struggling so hard, it was better to settle down and eke out a living as a local tyrant. and just enjoy life as best they could in the chaotic world they lived in. It was a decision that had benefits and drawbacks. Su Qing might have done that as well, except he had the feeling that you could only last for so long living in such a way. Eventually, someone would come along out of nowhere and crush you out of existence. Therefore, the only way to be truly safe, and the only way to stay alive, was to get stronger and stronger. I just want to stay alive in this chaotic world, and maybe improve my quality of life. Su Qing's thoughts were focused inward as the snake-necked dragon picked up speed. Eventually, as the wind buffeted his face, he caught sight of a city in the distance. It was not the city he had come from. Despite being a Foundation establishment cultivator now, Su Qing was just as cautious as when he was in the Qi condensation level. As he neared, he dispelled the snake-necked dragon and dropped to the ground. There he adjusted his clothing and changed his physical appearance so that he looked like a sallow-faced, middle-aged man. Then he started walking. The city ahead was not run solely by 7 blood eyes. It was a place similar to the city he'd passed through in the Crimson Wilds. Here, 7 blood eyes, the Violet Lands, and the Church of Departure cooperated to maintain a spot with a teleportation portal. Places like this were common throughout South Phoenix. There were many locations on the continent that were occupied by humans, but not considered to be the territory of any one specific organization. In some cases, shared cities were located on the borders. In other cases, they were in places with no resources, and were generally considered unimportant. However, in order to facilitate travel, multiple groups would create places that were relatively safe havens around the teleportation portals. Su Qing's arrival caused an alarmed buzz of activity among the city guards. Despite having hidden his life lamp and dispelling his snake-necked dragon, he was still a Foundation establishment cultivator, and his arrival in the city was noticed. Unless a Foundation establishment cultivator worked hard to conceal their fluctuations, then they would automatically release some of their aura, and that would cause alarm for any Qi condensation cultivators who sensed it. It was the same for Su Qing when he was a Qi condensation cultivator. He remembered the first time he saw Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior. Even from a distance, it had left him feeling shaken. And the Patriarch didn't even have a life flame, and could not enter the profound radiant state. The lower one's cultivation base, the stronger the effect would be. Only someone in the 8th level of Qi condensation could stand up to a Foundation establishment cultivator. And even then, it was only true because most Foundation establishment cultivators from small sects couldn't even open 30 Dharma apertures. A Foundation establishment cultivator from a big sect who had a life flame and could enter the profound radiant state would be someone that even the most amazing Qi condensation cultivator couldn't deal with. They were just on completely different levels. Back in the incident outside the Pilot Assistance Division, Honor Guard Li had shown up and spoken a single sentence that left Su Qing shaken to the core. The cultivators in this city reacted similarly to Su Qing's arrival. In the chaotic world that existed after the arrival of the god's broken face, the majority of cultivators were in the Qi condensation level. Relatively few ever reached Foundation establishment. Because of that, outside of cities, they were rare, and only big sects like 7 Blood Eyes would have Foundation establishment in numbers. It was only natural that Su Qing's arrival would cause something of a commotion. As the guards offered respectful greetings, and before Su Qing could even make his way toward the teleportation portal, powerful fluctuations rolled out from the direction of the city magistrate's manor. Frowning, Su Qing looked in that direction, his eyes cold. A beam of light appeared, shooting in his direction and coming to a stop about 9 meters away from him in the form of an extravagantly dressed middle-aged man. He was handsome and pulsed with Foundation establishment Dharma force as he sized up Su Qing. Meanwhile, Su Qing glanced at his throat and simultaneously tried to judge how many Dharma apertures he had opened. "Can I help you, fellow Taoist? I'm Zhou Hingley from the Zhou clan in Violet Lands. I was appointed as city magistrate to run this city, which is jointly owned by Violet Lands, 7 Blood Eyes, and the Church of Departure. I'm just passing through for teleportation," Su Qing said tranquilly. He could sense that this man didn't have many Dharma apertures open, and thus didn't have a life flame. Hingley hovered in the air, his expression nothing out of the ordinary. However, inside he was fully on guard, as he could sense a very strong baleful aura from this sallow-faced cultivator. Obviously, he had killed many people. However, it was hard to tell where he was from, and thus, Zhou Hingley didn't take the situation lightly. Especially noteworthy was how his hair stood on end when the young man looked at his throat. Most shocking of all was that he couldn't tell if this cultivator had a life flame. "After you," Zhou Hingley said, feeling shaken but trying not to show it. Turning, he gestured toward the teleportation portal and barked some orders. Immediately, everyone on the street moved to the side to make room for Su Qing, leaving a path that led straight to the portal. Su Qing's expression remained the same as ever. He could sense that the city magistrate wasn't very happy to have him in the city and wanted him to leave as quickly as possible. What was more, Su Qing could sense other powerful fluctuations in the city. They didn't come from a cultivator, but from a spell formation that was just being activated. This was an ordinary reaction as far as Su Qing was concerned. This was a city in the middle of the wilderness, so it made sense that they would be wary of a random Foundation establishment cultivator who showed up out of nowhere. Su Qing nodded. Then, instead of walking, he flew through the city toward the teleportation portal, kicking up a strong wind as he did, which sent dust flying everywhere. Pupils constricting, Zhou Hingli quickly followed. When Su Qing arrived at the teleportation portal, he saw that it had already been cleared for his use. There were no random people present, only the handful of guards that operated the portal, who trembled and bowed to him in greeting. "Well met, Senior. The teleportation portal is ready, sir. Where would you like to go?" Su Qing looked at them, and then at the city magistrate, who was obviously trying to look casual but was fully on guard. It really gave Su Qing a sense of what it meant to be a Foundation establishment cultivator. Walking up to the portal, he said, "The capital city of 7 Blood Eyes." The guards voiced acknowledgement, made some adjustments to the formation, and then after triple-checking to make sure everything was in order, backed away 30 or so meters. Su Qing looked at the teleportation portal. He wasn't intimately familiar with the workings of spell formations, but he had learned a bit. After examining it, he stepped onto the portal, whereupon the formation started shining with bright light. After he vanished, Zhou Hingli breathed a sigh of relief. He was in Foundation establishment, but he had no interest in provoking someone with such a powerful, baleful aura. 7 Blood Eyes doesn't permit outside Foundation establishment cultivators to enter their capital city, but that's where he's going. I'd say it's unlikely he's a criminal. So does that mean he's a 7 Blood Eyes Foundation establishment cultivator? Scratching his neck, Zhou Hingli decided not to think about it. As far as he was concerned, all outside Foundation establishment cultivators were dangerous. If such a person had a life flame and could enter the profound radiant state, they could take his life in an instant. Therefore, all he wanted to do with such people was escort them on their way as quickly as possible. If conflict erupted with a person like that, given how far away he was in the wilderness, away from his clan, he would be dead long before his clan had any idea what was happening. \\\\. In the eastern part of the continent of South Phoenix, where the mountains of truth connected to the sea, there were 7 huge blood-red eyes that looked down on a bustling city. In the city center, there was a teleportation portal, where Su Qing stepped out of the glittering light. The moment he appeared, and before he could even look around, his expression flickered. He could sense powerful fluctuations filling the city, and in the blink of an eye, they were converging on him. They didn't do anything, but they remained around him, as if they were monitoring him. Su Qing knew what was happening. This was the 7 Blood Eyes Grand Formation at work. It had never behaved like this in the past when he returned to the sect. But things were different now that he was in Foundation establishment. Now he had a better understanding of why outside Foundation establishment cultivators wouldn't blindly enter 7 Blood Eyes. From the perspective of the spell formation, the fact that he was in Foundation establishment was more important than him being a disciple. So though it recognized him as a disciple, until he went to the 7th peak to register his cultivation base, the spell formation would continue to monitor him closely. Taking a deep breath, he calmly walked off the teleportation portal. The fact that he was being monitored by the spell formation was not something other cultivators or ordinary citizens would notice. After leaving, he changed into the standard gray Taoist robe. He had learned his lesson after Sea Lizard Island, and upon returning had bought several gray robes as spares. As he walked down the street, he tested out whether hiding his cultivation base would prevent the spell formation from locking onto him. It didn't, which gave him an even deeper understanding of the spell formation. I wonder if it would work if I used my shadow. After some thought, he decided not to do any experiments. For the time being, it wasn't necessary, and besides, could theoretically be dangerous. I guess it's time to go up the 7th peak. Looking at the distant 7th peak, he started walking. As he passed the various shops, the cold and detached pedestrians, and the occasional gray-robed disciples, He thought back to everything that he'd done in Seven Blood Eyes. It caused him to sigh inwardly. At the same time, he was full of anticipation at the idea of getting his share of the sect's profits in the form of 5,000 spirit stones a month. Just as he was about to start walking faster toward the seventh peak, he noticed a familiar face. This person immediately attracted the attention of the common citizens, who looked at him in awe. Some of the nearby off-peak disciples stared at him with open envy. He was a young man in a pale violet Taoist robe. Of course, the color of his robe indicated how important he was. Coupled with his handsome features and his powerful cultivation-based fluctuations, he seemed like the child of a god descended into the mortal world. He was none other than Zhao Jingheng. Su Qing saw him. He saw Su Qing. Before, Zhao Jingheng would have ducked his head and walked in the other direction without saying a word to Su Qing. But today, he snorted coldly, waved his hand, and pointed toward the dome of heaven. All of a sudden, a forbidden sea dragon whale appeared above him, roaring briefly before vanishing. The scene caused a commotion in the area, with many of the off-peak disciples cheering loudly. Looking extremely pleased with himself, Zhao Jingheng faced the expressionless Su Qing. "I also cultivated a forbidden sea dragon whale," he said proudly. Su Qing showed no reaction whatsoever. Not wanting to waste time on Zhao Jingheng, he just kept walking toward the seventh peak. Zhao Jingheng frowned. He was a bit irritated that Su Qing didn't react with shock to his dragon whale. However, he hadn't forgotten everything that happened when they met out on the open sea, and therefore, he just bit his tongue, stowed any thoughts of showing off, and headed toward the seventh peak. He had come off the peak today to pick up a phoenix hairpin he'd had custom-made for elder sister Ding, and now he planned to give it to her. As he went further south in the city, he eventually neared the gate that led to the seven peaks. Because that was the only thing in this part of the city, there weren't a lot of pedestrians, and that was when a look of surprise appeared on his face as he realized Su Qing was still ahead of him. At this point, he realized that Su Qing must be planning to go to the peaks. Of course, Zhao Jingheng was curious about this, but being as proud as he was, he didn't ask for details. Sometime later, they were getting close to the stairs that led up the seventh peak. When they were about 300 meters away, he finally couldn't hold back any longer. Hurrying to catch up, he asked, "Where are you going, Su Qing?" "Up the peak," Su Qing replied with a slight frown. Zhao Jingheng looked Su Qing up and down, and didn't notice any unusual fluctuations coming from him to indicate he was stronger than before. What was more, he didn't see anyone waiting to receive Su Qing. Snorting coldly, he said, "Up the peak. Gray-robed disciples can't go up the peak unless they've been invited, and even if they have been invited, they have to wait to be escorted up. Only conclave disciples can go up without an escort." Su Qing ignored Zhao Jingheng and kept walking toward the stairs. Seeing this, Zhao Jingheng laughed coldly. "Off-peak disciples are prohibited from going up the peak, Su Qing. If you step onto that staircase, the spell formation will activate. Su Qing, if you keep walking you." Before he could finish speaking, Su Qing calmly placed his foot onto the first step on the staircase. The moment his foot touched the step, it suddenly blurred, as though some invisible force were gathering there to confirm something about him. Su Qing looked up toward the top of the peak and simultaneously released the power of his cultivation base. A foundation establishment aura erupted out, causing the tolling of bells to echo out from the top of the seventh peak. As the melodious sound filled the air, Su Qing started walking up the stairs. Behind him, Zhao Jingheng staggered backward under the force of the foundation establishment aura, trembling, his face pale and his eyes nearly popping out of his skull. Found, foundation establishment. The moment Su Qing's foundation establishment aura erupted out, and the sound of bells filled the seventh peak, three figures shot down from the top of the mountain. If an outside foundation establishment cultivator tried to step onto the peak, the spell formation would block their path, not cause bells to ring. Then the formation would ask why that cultivator was visiting. If they had come to pay a visit to someone on the peak, that person would be notified. If that person agreed to see the visitor, then the spell formation would let them in. That was what happened when Patriarch Golden Vajra Warrior came to visit Taoist Idol Cloud. But for bells to ring like this meant only one thing. A sect disciple had arrived who hadn't yet registered as reaching foundation establishment. Of course, enemy attacks were another matter entirely. Not every disciple in Seven Blood Eyes would use the sect's facilities set aside for foundation establishment breakthroughs. For one thing, such places were expensive. Also, most disciples who managed to claw their way up through chi condensation in such a chaotic world would have some destined opportunity that would set them apart from the masses. Such situations weren't uncommon. In a sect that focused solely on profit, Trust was a rare commodity, therefore. About 30% of disciples would leave the sect for their foundation establishment breakthrough. Such matters of destined opportunities often involved going to distant ruins. In such cases, other disciples would usually notice if someone close to a breakthrough left, and could theoretically follow them to take advantage of the situation. However, that was heavily frowned upon. After all, if word got out, it could harm the reputation of Seven Blood Eyes. Therefore, the sect was very strict about prohibiting internal fighting when it came to foundation establishment breakthroughs. Granted, it still happened, and in those cases, the Ampik cultivators didn't pay much attention, as whoever carried out such operations would plan them carefully. Few people would be foolish enough to try without doing so. Of course, Su Qing had carefully considered all of those factors before making his decision to leave the sect for his breakthrough. A sharp whistling sound could be heard as the three figures from further up the mountain flew toward him. In the lead position was an average-looking man in a violet robe, with a round face. He was the very same cultivator who had led Su Qing up to get his Taoist robe when he first joined the sect. He was also the one who had given Su Qing advice about his habit of holding his hand in a certain way, and had told him it was better to be a needle concealed in silk. Su Qing felt a bit nostalgic seeing him. Back then, he hadn't truly understood what it meant to be a needle concealed in silk, but after his experiences in Seven Blood Eyes, he knew firsthand how important it was. Su Qing had learned a lot in Seven Blood Eyes. Clasping hands, he bowed deeply to the three cultivators. He was met with hearty laughter. The round-faced cultivator landed in front of him and smiled warmly. "Su Qing, I knew when we first met that there was something special about you. That's why I gave you that advice. Now look, you're already someone I can consider a peer." "Many thanks for that advice, Senior," Su Qing said, clasping hands again. "You don't need to call me Senior. You're a foundation establishment cultivator now, so we can call each other Elder and Junior Brother. Junior Brother Su Qing, my name is Zhang Yunqi. From now on, just call me Elder Brother Zhang." Looking down, Zhang Yunqi noticed the astonished Zhao Zhengheng. Being a shrewd individual, he could guess what was going on between Zhao Zhengheng and Su Qing, but didn't ask any questions. "Junior Brother Su Qing, shall we go up the peak?" "If it's no bother, Elder Brother Zhang," Su Qing replied, politely bowing his head. At the same time, he respectfully clasped hands to the other two cultivators flanking Zhang Yunqi. Apparently, all Ampik Foundation establishment cultivators concealed their fluctuations, as he had no idea how strong any of them were. That included Zhang Yunqi. That realization made him more aware of keeping his guard. These two obviously ranked lower than Zhang Yunqi. When they realized that Su Qing and Zhang Yunqi knew each other, they smiled faintly and took their leave. And thus, Zhang Yunqi took Su Qing with him up the peak. The trees on either side of the mountain path connected overhead like a canopy, and as the sea breeze drifted through the leaves, birds sang. It sounded lovely, and also stirred Su Qing's memories, making him think back to the first time he'd walked this path. "Junior Brother Su," Zhang Yunqi said, "I was the one who introduced you to Offpeak life in Seven Blood Eyes. Today, I'll explain about Onpeak life. There are 13 elders on the 7th peak, and all of them are gold core cultivators. Underneath them are the foundation establishment cultivators like us. There are currently more than 140 of us in total. After you register today, there will be exactly 149 7th peak foundation establishment disciples." That seems like a lot, but it really is. In total, Seven Blood Eyes has close to 1,000. That's it. And remember that our sect is one of the 4 largest on the continent of South Phoenix. The point is that foundation establishment cultivators have a very high status. It's the same everywhere in South Phoenix, including Seven Blood Eyes. After you register, you'll start earning about 5,700 spirit stones per month. The exact amount changes every month depending on sect income and expenditures. As a foundation establishment cultivator, you have the right to live on the peak, but you'll have to spend your own money to get a mansion grotto. It's the same with foundation establishment techniques. In Qi condensation, you got them for free, but not now. That said, you do qualify to purchase any foundation establishment technique from the Hall of Scriptures and Magic. As a foundation establishment cultivator, you have 4 privileges. The first privilege comes with 2 options. The first option is to develop your own harbor in the port. It can be a sect harbor or a public harbor. As the owner, you'll split the profit from that harbor with the sect. That said, you'll have to run the business, and you'll need to provide the initial investment funds for the development. If you don't want to have your own harbor, your second option is to lay claim to one of the streets in the capital city. All of the shops on that street will pay their rent to you. That option is easier than the first. All foundation establishment cultivators get to pick between one of these two options. Take your time to think about which one fits you best. The second privilege is that if any off-peak disciple offends you, you can kill them on sight. However, you have to pay a fee of 10,000 spirit stones for the first person you kill. If you kill a second, you have to pay double and so on. You can never kill someone without paying that fee, and the debt can never be wiped out. Although Zhang Yunqi explained this with a smile, it caused Su Qing's pupils to constrict. This rule is something that all 7 Blood Eyes Foundation establishment cultivators have to bear in mind. It doesn't matter if you're outside the sect or in it. You always have to consider whether or not it's worth it to kill someone weaker than you. By the way, if it's an off-peak disciple from one of the other peaks, the fee is double. The third privilege is that you can pick 2 off-peak disciples, or anyone else that you approve of, to be your attendants. They earn the right to live for free in the capital city, or they can practice their cultivation on the peak, registered under your name. Coupled with the third privilege is the right to teleport to any 7 Blood Eyes city for free. In addition, every year, you can distribute 100 living permits for any 7 Blood Eyes city. Remember, in scavenger base camps and other small towns, such permits are very expensive, and they are only available to people with a recommendation from a 7 Blood Eyes. The final privilege is that you get protection from 7 Blood Eyes. Because of that, no gold core cultivator from the outside would dare try to kill you. In fact, assuming you pay enough spirit stones, not even a nascent soul cultivator would dare cut you down. Actually, if you offer enough spirit stones as a reward, the sect will even help you go out and kill people like that. Something you must remember is that, while off-peak disciples are like wolf pups, on-peak cultivators are a pack of lone wolves. You don't need to worry about gold core cultivators harming you in the sect. Outside the sect, you're on your own. But here in the sect, a gold core sect member who kills a foundation establishment disciple has to pay an initial fine of 1 million spirit stones. It's the same for a foundation establishment cultivator who kills another foundation establishment cultivator. And the fines double for every subsequent kill. Just like the fines I mentioned before, such debts can never be wiped out. Also, like I mentioned before, it's a situation of determining whether killing that person is really worth it. Zhang Yunqi was still smiling, but his words made it clear what the foundation establishment position and on-peak brutality were all about. "What are my responsibilities?" Su Qing asked. "Responsibilities," Zhang Yunqi chuckled. "All of us here worked hard to fight and kill our way up from among the off-peak disciples. It was all our own effort. Therefore, we owe no responsibilities to the sect. If you want to stick around, you can make money. If you want to leave, no one will try to get you to stay. That said, the missions posted by the sect offer handsome rewards, so people usually scramble to finish them. If you want to save up a lot of spirit stones, earning some extra on the side always helps. Now, if enemies harm our interests and interfere with our long-term profit, we will step in. After all, as long as foundation establishment cultivators are careful, we can live a very long time. So maintaining our monthly income is important. Of course, it's always possible that enemies will try to buy you off, and you're free to accept such offers if you want. But consider, do you really think our enemies are stupid? For one thing, they know that buying off 1 or 2 of our cultivators wouldn't be worth it. If they wanted to make any such operation work, they would need to buy off a lot of us. In fact, it would cost so much money that, in the end, it wouldn't even be worth it. Full-scale wars with our enemies can actually be quite profitable, as you learned in the grand competition, so our cultivators generally flock to join in the fighting. The on-peak elders know that disciples are wolf pups, so they don't worry much about overseeing us. Everything comes down to profit. The ones the leadership really care about are the conclave disciples, who enjoy the best aspects of the sect. They really try to give them a unifying force and sense of belonging. Thanks to Zhang Yunqi's explanation, Su Qing understood a lot more about on-peak life in 7 Blood Eyes. At this point, they were about halfway up the peak. You came at a bad time. Normally, new foundation establishment cultivators get to offer greetings to the Peak Lord, but all 7 Peak Lords went out to sea recently. I guess something big is going on. Grand Elder and Second Elder are gone as well, which means Third Elder is in charge right now. After you offer greetings to him, I'll take you to get your mansion grotto and show you the Hall of Scriptures and Magic. Just then, Su Qing spotted Third Elder's Grand Hall, which he had been to before. In fact, there was a familiar figure sitting cross-legged outside. It was none other than Honor Guard Li, who worked closely with Third Elder. Upon opening his eyes and seeing Su Qing and Zhang Yunqi, Honor Guard Li smiled faintly. I had a hunch the bells were ringing because you reached Foundation establishment. Su Qing clasped hands politely. Honor Guard Li was also masking his fluctuations. However, from what Su Qing remembered of being around him, he was likely in Foundation establishment and strong within that level. He's probably got a life flame, Su Qing thought, though he remained calm and collected. Go on in, the Elder S waiting for you. Honor Guard Li looked from Su Qing to Zhang Yunqi. Zhang Yunqi shrugged his shoulders and backed up a few steps to wait. Su Qing took a deep breath and walked into the hall for the second time. He sensed the same thing he had last time. As soon as he stepped in, he felt mountain-toppling, sea-draining force coming from the person seated cross-legged on the other side of the hall. But this time he was able to see the old man clearly. Third Elder had age spots on his face and wore a violet Taoist robe embroidered with gold. His face was completely expressionless as he looked at Su Qing. When their gazes met, Su Qing's mind spun. The Elder's eyes seemed to pierce through him like lightning, allowing the Elder to see everything about him. Thankfully, the life lamp was hidden by his shadow, and the Elder didn't detect it. Greetings, Third Elder, Su Qing said, inclining his head, clasping his hands and bowing deeply. You're so young, but you've already opened 2 Dharma apertures. Impressive. Then Third Elder said something that struck Su Qing to the core. So, you're the one who took the spirit breath lamp from the merfolk. Third Elder's question was like a thunderclap ringing in Su Qing's ears. However, he managed to keep his face mostly expressionless, and he didn't take much time thinking before responding. Yes, sir, he said respectfully. There was no point in hiding the truth. The merfolk's spirit breath lamp was valuable, but it wasn't something considered impossible to acquire. Although Su Qing had tried to hide any evidence that he was involved, if someone thoroughly investigated the matter, they would probably find clues leading to him. Lying wouldn't benefit him at all, and would actually make him seem more suspicious. What do you plan to do with it? Third Elder asked calmly. Sell it, Su Qing answered immediately. He looked up at Third Elder. The old man radiated endless ripples and distortions and caused immense pressure to weigh down on the entire hall, and when he had spoken just now, that pressure grew even more intense. The piercing nature of his gaze was similar to last time, except now, Su Qing found it easier to endure. On his previous visit, it had taken immense effort just to lift his head, and his eyes had burned. Upon hearing Su Qing's answer, Third Elder smiled. Apparently the answer satisfied him. Su Qing, I'm not going to beat around the bush, I like you. You took the spirit breath lamp fair and square, and I'm not going to try to take it away from you. I don't care about the lamp, but you do well to sell it quickly. Eventually, people are going to start wondering where it ended up. If I could figure out that you took it, so can someone else. Now give me your identity medallion. Shifting his gaze away from the Elder, Su Qing took out his identity medallion. Third Elder waved his hand, and the identity medallion flew over and landed on his palm. Almost instantly, it started shining with bright light. The Elder inspected it, and then a moment later, fluctuations rolled out as he imprinted it with new information. It shone more brightly, and then the light faded. Finally, the Elder sent it flying back to Su Qing. Su Qing caught it, expecting it to slam into him with immense force, as it happened when he offered greetings to the director when he checked in to the Violent Crimes Division. However, that didn't happen. When he caught the medallion, it was as if all the force dissipated the moment he touched it. That caused Su Qing's pupils to constrict as he realized how different Third Elder was from the director. It was easy to unleash force externally, but controlling it with such finesse was difficult. You can leave now, Third Elder said, closing his eyes. Su Qing again clasped hands respectfully, then turned to leave. Just as he was about to step out of the hall, Third Elder's voice reached him. Zhengheng has a good heart. I understand, Su Qing said, turning and bowing again. Then he left the hall. Last time, Third Elder hadn't said these words to him personally, but rather delivered them through Honor Guard Li. The reason was that back then Su Qing's status was too low, but things were different now. Upon leaving the hall, Honor Guard Li gave him a nod, then closed his eyes. Su Qing walked over to Zhang Yunqi. Smiling, Zhang Yunqi took him to get his Taoist robe and pick out a mansion grotto. Unfortunately, most of the mansion grottos were already occupied, so the one he picked was in a somewhat remote location. Even still, he liked it, and it wasn't as expensive as he'd imagined it would be. Finally, Zhang Yunqi took him to the Hall of Scriptures and Magic, where he could get some foundation establishment techniques. He also acquired a new body refinement method. By the time everything was taken care of, it was dusk. Zhang Yunqi took Su Qing back to his mansion grotto, then clasped his hands in farewell. Before leaving, he smiled and said, "Junior brother Su, there are two reasons why I'm the one who helped you out today. The first is that I think we're connected by destiny. The second is that I'm receiving a nice reward from the sect for accepting the task of receiving all new Onpeak disciples this month. So you don't need to be overly suspicious of why I'm working so hard to help you out. That said, I really do feel like there's some destiny at work in our encounters. If we ever meet each other while out at sea, I hope we can have each other's backs. Finally, junior brother Su Qing, I'd like to offer you a friendly tip. When we cultivators enter Foundation establishment, the most important thing is to open 30 Dharma apertures as quickly as possible. When you form your life flame, you can enter the profound radiant state. Cultivators without a profound radiant state are on a completely lower level than those who have it. Since you worked so hard to get into Foundation establishment, you must form your life flame as quickly as possible. Until then, you're at a huge disadvantage. Many dead Foundation establishment cultivators lost their lives before they formed their life flame. Foundation establishment cultivators without the profound radiant state can do little more than bully chi condensation cultivators. Having finished speaking, he glanced at Su Qing's right hand. Detecting no signs of the previous bad habit, he smiled and strolled away. Thanks to Zhang Yunqi's reminder and Su Qing's own understanding, he now realized more than ever how important life flames were in Foundation establishment. Clasping hands, he bowed toward Zhang Yunqi as he disappeared. At the same time, he relaxed the guard he had been keeping against the man. Turning, he looked at his new mansion grotto, which was located next to a cliff. Right now, the pitch-black stone door was closed, and there were weeds growing everywhere. There was even moss creeping up the door. A humid wind constantly blew through the area. After inspecting the area, Su Qing stepped up to the stone door and took out the jade slip that acted as the key. When he sent some spirit power into the jade slip, magical symbols glowed on the door. Then Su Qing used the method described in the jade slip to touch the magical symbols. After imprinting his mark onto the door, the magical symbols glowed brightly as the mansion grotto became linked to him. Then the door opened, revealing the interior. It wasn't very large inside. It had 2 rooms and was lit by luminescent pearls set into the ceiling. It obviously hadn't been used in a long time, as everything was covered in dust. Su Qing waved his hand, sending a wind through both rooms to clean them out. Then he closely inspected the entire place to make sure it was safe. After, he went back out and sprinkled poison powder everywhere. He applied the poison very liberally, making sure every area was thoroughly covered. Then he went back inside and spread even more poison. After, he took out his defensive spell formations and activated them. With the door closed and the formations activated, he breathed a relaxed sigh. Sitting down, he thought back to everything he had seen and heard. It reminded him of his first day in 7 Blood Eyes, except back then he was in chi condensation, and now he was in Foundation establishment. I'm finally in Foundation establishment. Thinking about all the perks to being a Foundation establishment cultivator in 7 Blood Eyes, he changed into his new violet robe. Looking down at the Taoist robe, his eyes shone. The robe itself had a defensive spell formation in it. It was the type of garment that people outside the sect, or even off-peak disciples, would fight over, assuming the color was different. After donning the robe, he sat down cross-legged and pulled out a jade slip. This was one of the Foundation establishment techniques he had acquired at the Hall of Scriptures and Magic. Pouring some spirit power into it, he examined the contents. He knew that it was important to start cultivating a Foundation establishment technique as quickly as possible after a breakthrough. Otherwise, he would be wasting time. After all, he could further the cultivation of his new and old techniques at the same time. Time passed as he examined the contents of the jade slip. Soon, moonlight touched the door of his mansion grotto, and eventually, the bright moon rose high in the sky. In the light of the moon, the stone door seemed simple and unsophisticated, yet also filled with the sensation of ancient time and profound changes. Inside the mansion grotto, Su Qing looked up from the jade slip, his eyes glittering sharply. Balefire soul-swallowing scripture. One of the 7th Peak's signature Foundation establishment techniques was the balefire soul-swallowing scripture. From the name alone, it was obviously something meant for killing. It was easy to imagine that this technique would be categorized as a nefarious art. That said, Su Qing felt that it was befitting of a sect named 7 Blood Eyes. The balefire soul-swallowing scripture wasn't divided up into different levels. Instead, the cultivation method was focused on opening Dharma apertures as quickly as possible. In addition to that, it allowed for the creation of a type of flame inside the Dharma apertures, a flame called balefire. When that flame was mixed with the aura of the Forbidden Sea, it created a bizarre reaction. The more one cultivated it, the hotter the balefire became. On the one hand, balefire could be used to attack. Also, it was a key component in the scripture's soul-swallowing aspect. After extracting the soul of an enemy, it was used like kindling for the flame. The resulting explosive force was used to burst open Dharma apertures. It was a brutal method, but at the same time, simple and direct. According to the technique description, a disciple cultivating the balefire soul-swallowing scripture could use the soul of a foundation establishment cultivator with no life flame to open one Dharma aperture. If using the souls of chi condensation cultivators, they would need over 100 to achieve the same result. Of course, the requirements only increased as one rose in cultivation level. Both sea beasts and non-humans can be used as kindling for the balefire soul-swallowing scripture. Between the two, non-humans are better, especially sea zombies. Because of their physical nature and their soul, they lead to spectacular results. The words in the Jade slip almost seemed to drip with blood. The technique was indeed simple. There was nothing complicated or flashy about it. It was just about pure brutality. After he finished reading the description, Su Qing took a deep breath. Upon cultivating the balefire soul-swallowing scripture to completion, the balefire would reach its ultimate state and would exist in all of one's Dharma apertures. At that point, one wouldn't need souls to open Dharma apertures, and you could extract enemy souls and imprison them inside the Dharma apertures. By burning them day and night, it was possible to make one's Dharma force even stronger. In a word, disciples who cultivated the balefire soul-swallowing scripture became living gods of death. However, not all disciples cultivated the technique. There were a total of 3 signature foundation establishment techniques in the 7th peak. The second technique was called the Sea King Register. It was a less brutal technique that focused on assimilating sea beasts, then using a special method to keep them in one's Dharma apertures and absorb nutrients from them. It was divided into 10 levels, and each level involved opening about 7 or 8 Dharma apertures. The key to cultivating it lay in constantly capturing and absorbing sea beasts. When fighting with this technique, the results were astounding. When all the Dharma apertures were opened, all of the numerous sea beasts inside the disciple would make their Dharma apertures very impressive. The first technique was brutal. It led to rapid cultivation advancement but required a lot of killing. As a result, the slightest mistake could also lead to the cultivator dying. The second technique revolved around sea beasts and made one's Dharma force more and more powerful. It made it easier to defend oneself, but at the same time didn't help improve battle prowess very much. The third technique was called the life-nurturing incantation. This technique was even milder and didn't involve the use of any external force. Disciples who cultivated this technique spent most of their time in seclusion. It took time to succeed, but came with some big advantages as one didn't need to go out fighting and killing. Because disciples who cultivated this technique didn't need to fight a lot, it was usually suitable for those who preferred support positions in a group. Each technique seemed good for different personalities, and each disciple would pick one based on their preferences. After thinking about it, Su Qing wasn't sure which one was best for him. The first one he ruled out was the Sea King Register, as it seemed mediocre at best. As for the balefire soul-swallowing scripture and the life-nurturing incantation, they seemed like polar opposites. \\\\\\\. As Su Qing wrestled with his decision, far away from 7 blood eyes out on the sea of endlessness, a dreadnought roared through the heavens. This dreadnought was almost like a godly entity. Everywhere it went, waves crashed beneath it. In one of the buildings on the dreadnought's back, Master Seventh was looking back in the direction of 7 blood eyes. Standing next to him was the same middle-aged servant who had given the identity medallion to Su Qing. He had a jade slip in his hand. After examining it, he turned to Master Seventh and quietly said, "Master Seventh, the kid reached Foundation establishment. After we return, shall I arrange for him to meet you?" Master Seventh shook his head. "There's no need. War is coming. We'll worry about it after that. I passed out 100 identity medallions. He was the first to report in, but there are others out there. We need to see how they measure up to each other. Besides, he has a long way to go before he's ready to become my 4th apprentice."